Hello everyone, and thank you for choosing to spend your evening here with me. If you enjoy these stories, I'd truly appreciate your subscription, like, and comments. It only takes a second for you, but it means the world to me and helps make each video even better. Now, get comfortable and let's begin. In the beginning, before the first sunrise painted the sky with golden light, before the pyramids rose from the desert sands, and before the pharaohs claimed their dominion over the two lands, there existed only the infinite primordial waters of Nun. These dark, chaotic waters stretched endlessly in all directions, concealing within their depths the potential for all creation. From this cosmic ocean, according to sacred texts carved upon temple walls and written on papyrus scrolls, emerged the first divine spark of life, the Bennu Bird, whose very existence would become the foundation of Egyptian cosmology, and the prototype for what later civilizations would call the phoenix. The Bennu Bird materialized from the waters of Nun not as a creature of flesh and feathers, but as a manifestation of pure creative power. Ancient Egyptian priests described this initial appearance as the moment when consciousness first stirred within the cosmic void. The bird's cry, piercing the eternal silence, became the first sound in the universe, a vibration that set all creation in motion. This was not merely the birth of a mythical creature, but a fundamental act of the world's creation itself, where order emerged from chaos and light triumphed over darkness. The appearance of the Bennu defied simple description, as befitting a being residing at the intersection of the physical and divine worlds. Standing about 3 feet tall, the bird possessed the elegant proportions of a heron, with a long, curved neck and legs that seemed to stretch impossibly upward. Its plumage shimmered with deep blue and purple hues, colors that seemed to contain the very essence of the pre-dawn sky. Most striking was the golden crest crowning its head, not merely feathers, but something resembling a living flame that flickered and danced without burning the bird itself. This fiery crown served as both an ornament and a symbol, embodying the divine spark that ignited creation from the primordial waters. The relationship between the Bennu and Ra, the supreme solar deity, formed the cornerstone of the Egyptian understanding of cosmic order. Ra, whose daily journey across the sky granted life to all things, saw in the Bennu Bird a kindred spirit, moreover, a vital aspect of his own divine nature. Ancient texts speak of the Bennu as the soul of Ra, the Ba, in which the essence of the sun god and his life force are contained. This was not merely a poetic metaphor, but a fundamental theological concept, explaining how divine energy manifests in the physical world. Every dawn, as Ra prepared to begin his celestial wanderings through the heavens, the Bennu Bird would descend upon the sacred trees of Heliopolis, the city that served as the primary center of sun worship in ancient Egypt. The timing of this daily ritual held profound significance. The bird's arrival coincided exactly with the moment the first rays of sunlight broke over the eastern horizon. This synchronicity was not accidental, it embodied the deep connection between the Bennu's life force and the solar cycle governing all existence. The sacred trees of Heliopolis, the Pasi and the sycamore, played a special role in this daily cosmic drama. The Pasi tree, with its broad, glistening leaves and sweet fruit, was considered a manifestation of the tree of life growing in the celestial realm. Its branches, always green and lush, symbolized eternal renewal and the resilience of life through all seasons. When the Bennu perched upon the Pasi at dawn, the combination of the bird's golden crest and the tree's emerald foliage created a living symbol of the union of solar fire and earthly fertility. The sycamore tree, no less sacred, possessed different symbolic qualities that complemented the life-giving properties of the Pasi. Known to the Egyptians as the celestial tree, the sycamore, with its massive trunk and spreading crown, provided a link between earth and sky. Its fig-like fruits were associated with nourishment and the sustenance of life, and its dense wood was prized for its durability and resistance to decay. By choosing the sycamore as a resting place, the Bennu demonstrated its role as a bridge between the mortal world and the divine sphere. The daily appearance of the Bennu at sunrise performed many functions within the cosmic order. When the bird spread its wings and let out its characteristic cry, It heralded the awakening of the sun god and his preparation for the day's journey. This was not just a symbolic gesture, but active participation in maintaining the world order. The voice of the Bennu, according to priestly texts, had the power to awaken not only Ra but all the forces of creation, tearing them from nocturnal rest and preparing them for a new day of activity and growth. The bird's role went beyond the duties of a simple herald. As Ra's solar bark prepared to cross the sky, the Bennu would sometimes join the divine procession, flying alongside the sun god's vessel as it sailed the celestial waters above the earth. During these flights, the bird served as both companion and protector. Its presence ensured that the solar journey proceeded without hindrance from the forces of chaos that constantly threatened the established order. Ancient Egyptian texts contain detailed information regarding the Bennu's connection to the broader cycles of creation and destruction governing the universe. The bird's lifespan, unlike that of ordinary creatures, was measured not in years but in cosmic epochs. According to sacred scriptures, the Bennu lived exactly 1,461 years, a period corresponding precisely to the Sothic cycle, an astronomical phenomenon marking the heliacal rising of the star Sirius and serving as the basis for the Egyptian calendar. This connection to astronomical cycles revealed the Bennu's function as a living calendar, a divine timekeeper whose very existence helped maintain the rhythm of the cosmic order. When the bird's life cycle approached its predetermined end, it did not simply die like mortal beings. Instead, it participated in a ritual of renewal reflecting the daily death and rebirth of the sun itself. The Bennu built a nest of aromatic wood and spices, and then ignited itself in a burst of divine fire that consumed both the bird and the nest in a spectacular blaze. From the ashes of this self-immolation emerged a new Bennu, identical to its predecessor, but renewed and full of strength. This cyclical death and rebirth were viewed not as a tragedy, but as a celebration of the eternal nature of the divine life force. The new bird immediately assumed the duties of its predecessor, ensuring that the cosmic order continued without interruption. This renewal process occurred not by chance, but at precisely calculated intervals, maintaining synchronization between the Bennu's life cycle and the great astronomical phenomena that defined the Egyptian understanding of time and eternity. The priests of Heliopolis kept detailed records of these renewal cycles, incorporating them into their religious calendar and using them to predict significant events in both the divine and mortal worlds. The appearance of a newly reborn Bennu was considered an omen of special importance, often coinciding with the beginning of new dynasties or major shifts in the political and religious landscape of Egypt. The Bennu's connection to creation extended beyond its role in the daily solar cycle, and encompassed the very foundations of existence. According to the Heliopolitan creation myth, the bird's first cry from the primordial waters of Nun did not merely herald the beginning of creation. In fact, it caused it. The sound waves generated by the Bennu's voice rippled across the cosmic waters, creating the first vibrations that eventually condensed into matter, energy, and consciousness. This creative power was not limited to the initial moment of universal genesis. Every dawn, when the Bennu renewed its cry from the sacred trees, it participated in the continuous process of creation, helping to maintain the delicate balance between order and chaos that allows life to flourish. The bird's voice served as a daily reminder that creation is not a one-time completed event, but an ongoing process requiring constant attention and renewal. The transformation of the sacred Bennu bird from an exclusively Egyptian divine entity into the legendary phoenix known throughout the Mediterranean world began in the 5th century BC with the travels of Herodotus of Halicarnassus. This Greek historian, whose insatiable curiosity about foreign lands and customs earned him the title Father of History, arrived in Egypt during the period of Persian rule, when the ancient kingdom served as a satrapy of the Achaemenid Empire. The Egypt that Herodotus encountered was a land where multi-millennial traditions continued to flourish despite foreign political control, and the temples of Heliopolis remained active centers of religious practice, where priests maintained the ancient rituals associated with the Bennu bird. Herodotus approached Egyptian religion with the methodical curiosity of an ethnographer, seeking to understand and document beliefs that seemed so alien to the Greek worldview. When he inquired about the sacred bird of Heliopolis, the Egyptian priests provided him with detailed accounts that he would later record in his histories. However, cultural and linguistic barriers between Greek and Egyptian thought gave rise to inevitable distortions during this transfer of knowledge. The priests spoke of the Bennu's connection to solar cycles, its periodic self-immolation, and its role in maintaining cosmic order. But these concepts had no direct equivalents in Greek religious thought. The Greek language itself created difficulties for accurately conveying Egyptian religious notions. The word Bennu, derived from the Egyptian verb weben, meaning to rise or to shine, carried connotations resonating with the bird's solar associations and its day appearance at dawn. Greek translators, lacking an exact equivalent, adapted the word phonetically, gradually transforming Bennu into phoenix. This linguistic evolution was not merely a matter of pronunciation, but reflected a fundamental shift in understanding. The Greek word phoenix carried its own etymological baggage, potentially deriving from a Phoenician word meaning purple-red, which matched the Greeks' notions of the bird's fiery nature, but eclipsed its original solar symbolism. Herodotus recorded his observations with characteristic attention to detail, noting that the Egyptians claimed the phoenix appears in Heliopolis only once every 500 years. This time interval differed significantly from the 461-year Sothic cycle that Egyptian priests actually associated with the Bennu. This suggests that the information was either simplified for foreigners, or that Herodotus misunderstood the complex astronomical calculations underlying Egyptian religious chronology. The historian described the bird as resembling an eagle in size and general appearance, with plumage combining gold and red colors. This description differed significantly from the heron-like proportions and blue-purple coloration characteristic of the original Bennu. The discrepancy between Herodotus's account and authentic Egyptian sources reveals the interpretative lens through which the Greeks perceived alien religious concepts. While Egyptian priests emphasized the role of the Bennu as a manifestation of divine creative power and its connection to cosmic cycles, Greek observers focused on the more dramatic aspects of the bird's life cycle, especially the spectacular self-immolation preceding its rebirth. This shift in emphasis reflected fundamental differences between the Egyptian and Greek religious consciousness. The Egyptians perceived divinity as an inherent part of the natural order, while the Greeks were more inclined to view divine intervention as extraordinary events that disrupted habitual patterns. The physical transformation of the Bennu into the phoenix involved more than a simple misunderstanding. Greek artistic and literary traditions demanded beings that conformed to Hellenic aesthetic preferences and narrative canons. The original heron-like proportions of the Bennu, while perfectly suited for its role in Egyptian cosmology, seemed insufficiently majestic to Greek observers for a creature of such great presumed power. Consequently, in Greek descriptions, the phoenix was increasingly depicted as eagle-like with broad wings, powerful talons, and a fierce appearance, consistent with Greek preferences for dramatic heroic imagery. The color palette also underwent significant changes during this cultural transmission. The subtle blue-purple plumage of the Bennu, personifying the pre-dawn sky and the mysterious depths of the primordial waters, was replaced in Greek narratives by brilliant combinations of gold, red, and orange colors that pointed more explicitly to fire and solar energy. This chromatic shift made the phoenix more visually spectacular, making it easier for a Greek audience to connect this image with concepts of divine flame and purification. However, it removed the sophisticated color symbolism that made the Bennu such a complex theological entity. In Egyptian thought, Greek religious syncretism played a decisive role in the evolution of the phoenix, from an Egyptian import to an integral component of Hellenic mythology. The Hellenistic period, beginning with the conquests of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, created unprecedented opportunities for cultural exchange and religious fusion. Greek settlers in Egypt, especially in cosmopolitan Alexandria, directly encountered Egyptian religious practices and began incorporating selected elements into their own spiritual systems. The phoenix proved particularly attractive to Greek syncretists because it could be interpreted through existing Hellenic concepts while retaining enough exoticism to seem authentically foreign. The process of syncretism involved more than just the simple borrowing of foreign elements. Greek religious thinkers actively reinterpreted the phoenix myth to bring it into alignment with their philosophical and theological interests. Where Egyptian priests emphasized the Bennu's role in maintaining cosmic order through regular predictable cycles, Greek philosophers found in the phoenix a symbol of individual transformation and spiritual purification. This shift reflected broader differences between the Egyptian and Greek worldviews. The Egyptians prioritized stability and continuity, while the Greeks celebrated change and personal achievement. The inclusion of the phoenix in Greek mystery religions demonstrated the creature's adaptability to various religious contexts. Mystery cults, promising initiation into secret knowledge of death and rebirth, found in the phoenix a powerful symbol of the spiritual transformation. Their rituals allegedly facilitated the bird's cyclical death and resurrection, provided a concrete image for abstract concepts of spiritual renewal, making it easier for initiates to visualize and internalize the promised benefits of their participation in the religion. Greek artistic representations of the phoenix increasingly diverged from Egyptian depictions of the Bennu, reflecting not only different aesthetic preferences but also different symbolic priorities. If in Egyptian art the Bennu was depicted with naturalistic proportions befitting a creature participating in daily cosmic rituals, then Greek artists emphasized the phoenix's supernatural qualities through exaggerated features and dramatic poses. The bird's crest became more intricate, often depicted as an actual flame rather than the golden feathers described in Egyptian sources. Its wings became larger and more powerful, resembling a creature capable of spectacular aerial displays, rather than the measured ritual flights associated with the Bennu. The narrative structure surrounding the phoenix also underwent significant changes. During its Greek transformation, Egyptian accounts of the Bennu focused on its regular appearances and integration into ongoing cosmic processes, presenting the bird as a reliable, predictable element of the divine order. Greek versions, by contrast, emphasized the rarity of the phoenix and the exceptional character of its appearances. The bird turned into a creature of omens and portents whose arrival signaled significant changes in human affairs, rather than the steady maintenance of natural cycles. This shift in narrative emphasis reflected deeper cultural differences in the relationship between the divine and mortal worlds. Egyptian religion represented the deity as closely involved in daily existence, where gods and goddesses actively participate in natural processes and human activity. Greek religion, while recognizing divine influence on mortal affairs, maintained a clearer distinction between the sacred and profane spheres. The phoenix, filtered through Greek perception, became a messenger from the divine realm rather than a permanent inhabitant of the natural world. The geographical associations of the phoenix also evolved. While the Bennu remained firmly rooted in the specific landscape of Heliopolis and the sacred trees growing there, Greek accounts began to place the phoenix in more generalized exotic locations. Some versions placed the bird in Arabia, land the Greeks associated with valuable spices and aromatic substances suitable for the phoenix's funeral pyre. Others located it in India or Ethiopia, regions representing the mysterious edges of the known world, where extraordinary creatures might well exist. This geographical shift performed several functions in Greek adaptations of the myth. It uprooted the creature from its specific Egyptian religious context, making it accessible for inclusion in Greek narratives without the need for detailed knowledge of Egyptian theology. It also enhanced the exotic appeal of the phoenix, linking it to distant lands that most Greeks would never visit, allowing storytellers to embellish the myth without fear of contradiction. By first-hand observations, The temporal aspects of the phoenix myth underwent a similar modification. The precise astronomical calculations governing the Bennu's life cycle in Egyptian religion were replaced by more approximate timeframes that varied significantly across different Greek sources. Some accounts retained Herodotus's 500-year cycle, while others suggested intervals ranging from 300 to 1,400 years. This variation reflected the Greeks' tendency to prioritize narrative flexibility over astronomical precision, allowing storytellers to adapt the myth to various dramatic requirements. The materials associated with the phoenix's funeral pyre also evolved to reflect Greek, rather than Egyptian cultural associations. If Egyptian accounts of the Bennu's self-immolation emphasized the sacred types of wood and resins used in temple rituals, then Greek versions included aromatic substances that held significance in Hellenic culture. Cinnamon, myrrh, and other valuable spices replaced the persea and sycamore wood, creating a funeral pyre that seemed appropriately luxurious for such an extraordinary creature. These modifications were not accidental changes, they reflected systematic efforts to give the phoenix myth intelligibility and significance within the framework of Greek culture. The emphasis on valuable spices matched Greek associations between divine beings and costly offerings, while the spectacular nature of the funeral pyre satisfied Greek preferences for dramatic, emotionally engaging narratives. The resulting phoenix myth retained enough of its Egyptian roots to seem authentically ancient, while incorporating enough Greek elements to resonate with a Hellenic audience. The transformation of the phoenix from the Egyptian Bennu into a Greek legend brought with it a complete reimagining of the creature's geographical origin and its sacred spaces. While the Bennu was closely associated with specific temples and sacred groves in Heliopolis, Greek sources began to transport the phoenix to distant exotic lands that captured the Hellenic imagination. Arabia became the primary homeland of this majestic bird, a choice reflecting both practical considerations and the symbolic requirements of the evolving myth. Greek geographers and naturalists of the classical period perceived Arabia as a land of extraordinary abundance, where the very air was saturated with the aromas of valuable spices and fragrant wood. This perception was not entirely fantastical. The Arabian Peninsula did indeed serve as a crucial link in the ancient spice trade, where merchants transported cinnamon, cassia, frankincense, and myrrh from distant lands through Arabian markets to Mediterranean consumers. The connection between Arabia and aromatic substances made it a natural choice for authors seeking to explain the legendary funeral pyre of the phoenix, which required materials of exceptional quality and rarity. The legendary nest of the phoenix described in Greek sources represented a masterpiece of natural architecture, surpassing human skill in both beauty and symbolic significance. Unlike ordinary birds that build nests from available twigs and grass, the phoenix selected only the finest materials for its final resting place. The base consisted of cassia bark collected from trees growing in the remote mountains of Arabia, where the intense heat of the desert sun concentrated the aromatic oils in the bark to the maximum. This cassia, valued in Mediterranean markets more than gold, formed thick cushioning layers intended to support the phoenix during its final transformation. Above this base, the phoenix wove cinnamon branches, their thin bark releasing clouds of sweet aroma with every movement of the great bird. These cinnamon branches, gathered from trees growing only in the most inaccessible valleys of the Arabian highlands, possessed an almost supernatural ability to ignite at the precise temperature created by the phoenix's internal fire. The interlacing of these branches created a complex geometric pattern that seemed to follow mathematical principles beyond human understanding. Since every intersection was calculated for maximum structural integrity and combustibility, the upper layers of the nest included even more exotic materials, including fragments of fragrant wood that merchants claimed grew only in gardens cultivated by divine beings. Sandalwood from the remotest corners of the known world provided the structural elements that burned with a pure white flame, while pieces of aloe contributed their characteristic bittersweet aroma to the complex olfactory symphony accompanying the phoenix's immolation. This wood, seasoned for decades, or even centuries, before the phoenix deemed it worthy of inclusion, had developed internal structures resembling crystalline formations. The patterns of its fibers created natural channels for the flow of aromatic oils. Throughout the nest were interspersed quantities of precious resins and gums gathered by the phoenix. During its travels around the world, tiers of frankincense, each representing a perfect sphere of golden resin, were embedded into the nest structure like gemstones in a crown. These tiers, formed when frankincense trees were damaged by desert winds or the claws of wild animals, contained concentrated essences that revealed their full aromatic potential only under the intense heat of the phoenix's self-immolation. Myrrh, darker and more complex in aroma, served as a counterpoint to the frankincense, its bitter undertones adding depth and sophistication to the fragrant blend. The construction process itself followed patterns reflecting cosmic principles, rather than mere avian instinct. The phoenix began building the nest during the waning moon, when the tidal forces governing all natural processes were at their weakest. This timing ensured that the construction of the nest occurred during a period of maximum stability, when the fragile balance of aromatic oils in the various materials remained untouched by external influences. Each day's work followed the sun's path across the sky. The phoenix added materials in a clockwise spiral, mirroring the celestial movements that govern the passage of time. The finished nest had a diameter of about 12 feet, large enough to accommodate the phoenix's significant wingspan when fully unfolded, yet compact enough so that the heat generated during the immolation reached every part of the structure simultaneously. The height varied according to complex calculations that factored in the size of the phoenix, the combustibility of the materials, and the optimal airflow required for complete combustion. Modern observers noted that the proportions of the nest seemed to follow the same mathematical ratios that govern the construction of temples and other sacred architecture. When the moment of transformation arrived, the phoenix positioned itself in the very center of the nest. Its majestic plumage was arranged in precise patterns, facilitating the even distribution of heat throughout its entire body. The bird's final song, which eyewitnesses described as a combination of a nightingale's sweetness with the power of an eagle's cry, served as both a farewell and an invocation. This song possessed a supernatural ability to ignite the aromatic materials of the nest, giving rise to a conflagration burning in colors never seen in ordinary fire. The flames consuming both the phoenix and the nest burned in layers of different shades, where each color corresponded to the combustion of specific aromatic materials. Cassia bark produced a deep amber flame forming the base of the pyre, while cinnamon branches added ribbons of golden fire that danced and twisted within this amber base. Tiers of frankincense flared with a brilliant white flame rising straight up like pillars of light, and myrrh created darker, mysterious tongues of fire that seemed to absorb light rather than emit it. This extraordinary combustion lasted for 3 days and 3 nights, during which the intensity of the flames never diminished, and the fire required no external fuel other than the materials originally placed in the nest. The heat released was so intense it was felt miles away, yet it never extended beyond the precise boundaries of the nest itself. Local fauna fled the area during this period, instinctively recognizing the supernatural nature of the fire, while the air itself seemed to shimmer with aromatic vapors, inducing visions in any human witnesses brave enough to remain nearby. From the ashes of this majestic fire emerged not the fully formed phoenix of later traditions, but initially a small worm or larva that bore no resemblance to the majestic bird that preceded it. This larval form, no larger than a human finger, possessed an opalescent quality, reflecting light in iridescent patterns on its segmented body. The transformation from worm to phoenix occurred over several days. The creature gradually acquired recognizable avian features, absorbing the residual magical energy contained within its predecessor's ashes. The mystical journey from Arabia to Heliopolis represented one of the most extraordinary aspects of the phoenix legend, merging elements of pilgrimage, funeral rite, and cosmic navigation into a single complex narrative. This journey began not immediately after the phoenix's rebirth, but only after the young bird reached full maturity and developed the supernatural abilities necessary for such an undertaking. Preparation for this path involved collecting and preparing the most precious thing. The phoenix possessed the remains of its predecessor, carefully preserved inside a specially constructed container of solidified myrrh. The creation of this myrrh egg represented a feat of natural craftsmanship that rivaled the construction of the funeral nest in its complexity and symbolic significance. The phoenix began by collecting the finest tiers of myrrh from trees scattered across the Arabian Peninsula, selecting only those specimens that had achieved perfect transparency and optimal aroma intensity. These tiers then underwent a purification process, involving exposure to specific combinations of solar, lunar, and stellar radiation, with each phase of treatment calculated according to astronomical computations of extraordinary precision. The purified myrrh then took shape using techniques that seemed to transcend ordinary physical laws. The phoenix used its beak and claws to mold the resinous material into a perfect egg shape. The walls of this container were thin enough to let light through, yet strong enough to withstand the rigors of an intercontinental flight. The interior was carefully hollowed out to accommodate the ashes and bone fragments of the previous phoenix, which were sorted and arranged according to principles reflecting the bird's understanding of anatomical resurrection. Loading the myrrh egg required exceptional precision and reverence from the phoenix, as the placement of each fragment of the predecessor's remains followed specific patterns, intended to facilitate the final reunion of the old phoenix's essence with its successor. Large bone fragments were placed first, arranged to recreate the deceased bird's skeletal structure in miniature. Then the ashes were distributed according to their origin in the predecessor's body, with the ashes from the heart region receiving special attention. They were placed in the very center of the container. Once the myrrh egg was sealed using techniques that fused the resinous material at a molecular level, the phoenix began preparations for the long flight to Egypt. This preparation included not only physical conditioning, but also rituals of spiritual purification that turned the bird's internal energy to the cosmic forces guiding its navigation across the vast distances separating Arabia from the Nile Valley. The phoenix fasted 4 periods corresponding to lunar cycles, consuming only dew collected from specific aromatic plants and water from springs never touched by a human hand. The flight itself followed routes that had no relation to the practical considerations guiding ordinary migratory paths. Instead of the shortest way across the Red Sea to Egypt, the phoenix's journey traced complex geometric patterns in the sky corresponding to stellar configurations and planetary positions. These aerial maneuvers served multiple purposes, including charging the myrrh egg with cosmic energy and announcing the phoenix's approach to spiritual entities throughout the region. Contemporary accounts describe the phoenix's flight as visible from vast distances. The bird's fiery plumage created a streak of light in the sky that could be observed even during daylight hours. The sound of the phoenix's wings generated musical tones varying with the bird's altitude and speed, creating aerial symphonies said to induce prophetic visions in those who heard them. These acoustic effects were the result of the interaction of the phoenix's supernatural feathers with atmospheric conditions at different altitudes, where each wing beat produced harmonics resonating with the fundamental frequencies of creation itself. The approach to Egypt's airspace marked a crucial phase of the journey, since the phoenix had to navigate the complex spiritual geography surrounding the sacred sites of the Nile Valley. Its route passed by numerous temples and holy places, each responding to the phoenix's presence with various supernatural phenomena. Temple bells rang without human intervention, sacred flames spontaneously increased their intensity, and priest astronomers observed unusual stellar activity coinciding with the phoenix's passage. Overhead, the final approach to Heliopolis required the phoenix to follow specific aerial corridors, established by millennia of sacred traditions. These invisible paths, known only to beings of a divine nature, looped in the sky above the ancient city, in patterns reflecting the layout of the temple complex below. The phoenix's navigation of these corridors served simultaneously as a demonstration of its supernatural abilities, and a form of ritual purification, preparing the bird for its sacred duties within the temple's confines. The Temple of the Sun in Heliopolis, the final destination of the Phoenix's pilgrimage, represented the convergence point of Egyptian sun worship and the cosmic principles embodied by the legendary bird. This massive complex, built over centuries by successive pharaohs and constantly modified to reflect evolving theological understanding, served as the primary center for the worship of Ra and associated solar deities, governing Egyptian religious life. The temple's architecture included astronomical alignments, allowing priests to track the movements of celestial bodies with extraordinary precision, making it an ideal location for rituals requiring synchronization with cosmic cycles. The temple's central sanctuary housed the most sacred artifacts of the sun cult, including the Bennu stone, a pyramidal object believed to personify the primordial mound from which all creation emerged. This stone, carved from a single piece of meteoric iron and polished to mirror perfection, served as the center of rituals associated with the phoenix and its connection to solar divinity. Inscribed upon the surface of the stone were hieroglyphic texts describing the cosmic principles governing the cycles of death and rebirth, providing a textual basis for the phoenix's role in Egyptian religious practice. The arrival of the phoenix at the Temple of the Sun triggered a complex ceremonial response involving the entire priestly hierarchy of Heliopolis. The bird's approach was first detected by priest astronomers stationed on the temple's observation platforms, who used specialized instruments to track the phoenix's flight path and calculate the exact time of its arrival. This information was then transmitted throughout the temple complex using a system of signal fires and trumpet calls designed specifically to announce supernatural visitations. The physical magnificence of the phoenix, recorded by ancient observers who claim to have seen the creature during its rare appearances, defied simple classification within the natural world. Standing 4 to 5 feet tall when fully upright, the phoenix possessed proportions that combined the elegance of a heron with the majestic presence of an eagle. Its neck, longer and more gracefully curved than that of any known bird, could extend to nearly half the creature's total height, allowing the phoenix to survey its surroundings with regal authority, while maintaining the fluidity of movement characteristic of its every gesture. The phoenix's head was crowned with a distinctive crest, which served as perhaps its most recognizable feature. Unlike the simple feather tufts of ordinary birds, this crown consisted of plumes that seemed to contain actual fire, flickering and dancing in response to the creature's emotional state and the intensity of its inner flame. Each individual feather in the crest measured 6 to 8 inches in length, tapering to tips so fine they appeared translucent in backlit sunlight. The base of each crest feather had a deep golden hue that gradually transitioned into amber and orange before culminating in tips that glowed with the pure white heat of celestial fire. The eyes of the phoenix drew particular attention from ancient authors, who struggled to find adequate comparisons for their extraordinary appearance. Being larger than the eyes of any earthly bird, they were nearly 2 inches in diameter and possessed an internal luminescence that made them visible, even in total darkness. The iris displayed a complex pattern of interlocking geometric shapes that seemed to shift and rotate under direct observation, creating an optical effect described by many eyewitnesses as hypnotic. The color defied simple description, appearing at times like molten gold, then like deep amber, and sometimes flashing with the brilliant blue-white radiance of lightning. The phoenix's beak, proportional to an eagle's but made of a material resembling polished obsidian, possessed edges sharp enough to cut through the hardest species of aromatic wood. During this construction, the upper mandible curved in a perfect arc, ending in a needle-sharp point, while the lower mandible was reinforced with what ancient observers described as veins of precious metal that caught and reflected light with every movement. The inner cavity of the beak glowed with a soft, warm light that intensified when the phoenix prepared to sing, indicating an internal illumination source linked to the creature's vocal abilities. The wings of the phoenix represented perhaps the most breathtaking aspect of its anatomy, reaching a span of 12 to 15 feet when fully unfurled. The primary flight feathers, each up to 3 feet long, demonstrated the creature's characteristic golden coloration at its maximum intensity. These feathers possessed an unusual structure that allowed them to create both lift and the musical tones that accompanied the phoenix's flight. Microscopic examination conducted by ancient natural philosophers showed that each feather contained hollow chambers arranged in complex patterns that functioned like organ pipes, producing sounds of varying pitch depending on air pressure and wing position. The secondary feathers created a brilliant spectacle of crimson and orange colors that seemed to shimmer and flow like liquid fire as the phoenix moved. These shorter feathers, numbering in the hundreds, were arranged in overlapping layers, creating depth and volume in the wing's overall appearance. Each feather possessed the remarkable property of retaining its color and luminosity even after falling out, which led to their collection and use in the most sacred religious ceremonies throughout the ancient world. The tail feathers of the phoenix extended nearly 4 feet beyond the creature's body, forming a magnificent train that the bird could fan out in moments of special significance. These feathers combined all the colors present on the phoenix's body, with golden bases transitioning into orange and crimson before ending in tips that seemed to burn with actual flame. The arrangement of these rectrices followed mathematical principles that created interference patterns when the phoenix spread its tail, generating optical effects that seemed to bend and distort light itself. The symbolic significance of the phoenix's golden and crimson coloration went far beyond simple aesthetic appeal, directly linking the creature to the fundamental principles of sun worship that dominated ancient Mediterranean religions. Gold, the metal of the sun and the color of divine light, represented the eternal, unchanging aspects of the solar deity. When the phoenix displayed its golden plumage, it manifested the incorruptible nature of solar energy and the continuous creative power that sustains all life. This golden radiance was not merely reflected, but seemed to emanate from within the feathers themselves, as if each feather contained a fragment of the sun's own essence. The crimson coloration, complementing the phoenix's golden hues, carried an equally profound symbolic meaning in the context of the sun cult. The color red represented the active, transformative aspects of solar energy, the force that caused change, growth, and renewal. As the phoenix's crimson feathers caught the light, they seemed to pulse with the rhythm of a cosmic heartbeat, embodying the dynamic energy that drove the cycles of death and rebirth central to the creature's mythological significance. This color also linked the phoenix to dawn and sunset, the daily moments of solar transformation, when the sun's light takes on reddish hues marking the transitions between day and night. The interplay of gold and crimson in the phoenix's plumage created visual effects that ancient observers interpreted as manifestations of divine harmony. These two colors never appeared in simple static patterns, but flowed and merged in ever-changing tableaus reflecting the phoenix's internal state and its connection to cosmic forces. In moments of rest, the colors blended smoothly, creating gradual transitions that suggested the peaceful coexistence of different aspects of the solar deity. When the phoenix became agitated or prepared for self-immolation, the colors separated into distinct bands and patches that seemed to compete for dominance on the creature's body. Various ancient sources provided varying descriptions of the phoenix's physical characteristics, and these variations reflected the cultural context and religious priorities of their respective civilizations. Egyptian lore, drawing upon the original traditions of the Bennu Bird, emphasized the phoenix's link to specific astronomical cycles and described coloration that included deep blue and purple tones alongside the more frequently mentioned gold and crimson. These cooler colors represented the pre-dawn sky and the primordial waters from which creation emerged, linking the phoenix to the fundamental cosmological principles of Egyptian religion. Greek sources, by contrast, tended to emphasize the more dramatic and visually striking characteristics of the phoenix, focusing on brilliant gold and fiery red, which matched Hellenic preferences in heroic imagery. Greek authors consistently described the phoenix as larger and more eagle-like than the Egyptian Bennu, with proportions that inspired power and majesty, rather than the slender elegance emphasized. In Egyptian accounts, this transformation reflected the Greek tendency to interpret foreign religious concepts through the lens of their own culture, adapting the phoenix's appearance to Greek expectations of divine beings. Roman writers introduced additional variations reflecting their empire's familiarity with diverse cultural traditions. Some Roman accounts described specimens of the phoenix, with silvery highlights complementing the traditional gold and crimson, indicating the influence of Northern European traditions that linked silver with the lunar deity and female creative principles. Other Roman sources mentioned varieties of the phoenix with green undertones that linked the creature with fertility and agricultural abundance, reflecting the Romans' practical concern with the prosperity and productivity of their vast territories. The voice of the phoenix represented one of its most remarkable and supernatural characteristics, possessing qualities that transcended ordinary avian vocalizations and approached the realm of divine music. Ancient writers struggled to describe sounds that seemed to exist beyond the normal range of human hearing, combining frequencies that could be felt as much as heard. The phoenix's song began in registers so low they resonated in the bones of listeners, creating physical sensations that seemed to emanate from within the body, rather than from external sources. As the phoenix's song progressed, it ascended through octaves spanning the entire range of human hearing and above, including harmonics that created complex interference patterns in the surrounding air. These harmonics generated visual effects accompanying the auditory experience. Listeners reported the appearance of colored lights and geometric patterns that seemed to dance in synchronization with the music. The highest registers of the song reached frequencies approaching ultrasound, creating effects that could be perceived only by the most sensitive listeners, but which seemed to resonate with the fundamental vibrations of creation itself. The mythological connection between the voice of the phoenix and divine music reflected an ancient understanding of sound as a creative force, capable of bringing order out of chaos. It was believed that the phoenix's song contained the same harmonic principles that govern the movement of celestial bodies, making it an audible manifestation of the cosmic order that maintains universal stability. When the phoenix sang, it participated in the continuous process of creation, adding its voice to the heavenly choir that sustained the fabric of reality. Through pure musical harmony, different phases of the phoenix's life cycle gave rise to distinct variations in its vocal characteristics, each performing specific functions within the creature's mythological role. The song of a young phoenix, having just emerged from the ashes of its predecessor, possessed a clarity and purity that ancient listeners compared to the sound of crystal bells, ringing in perfect harmony. This youthful voice carried overtones of hope and renewal, announcing the successful completion of the rebirth cycle and the continuation of the phoenix's eternal mission. As the phoenix matured, its voice acquired deeper and more complex qualities, reflecting the accumulation of cosmic wisdom and spiritual power. The song of the mature phoenix included subtle variations in pitch and timbre that seemed to tell stories of ancient events and forgotten knowledge, turning each performance into a repository of historical and mythological information that could be decoded by listeners with sufficient spiritual sensitivity. These songs served as oral traditions, preserving cosmic knowledge throughout the centuries, ensuring that essential information about the nature of reality would survive even after the most catastrophic upheavals of human civilization. The final song of the phoenix, preparing for self-immolation, represented the culmination of the creature's vocal abilities, uniting all the elements developed during its life into a single transcendent performance. This farewell song began with the clear tones of youth, moved through the complex harmonies of maturity, and concluded with frequencies that seemed to originate entirely from beyond the physical world. Ancient witnesses described this final performance as simultaneously heartbreaking and exhilarating, embodying in a single unforgettable musical experience both the sorrow of the end and the joy of transformation. The voice of the phoenix also possessed practical applications extending beyond its symbolic and spiritual significance. serving as a navigational instrument during the creature's legendary flights, and a means of communication with other supernatural entities. Specific frequencies produced by the phoenix's song could resonate with crystalline formations in mountain ranges and desert regions, creating acoustic landmarks that help guide the creature during its transcontinental journeys. These same frequencies could penetrate the barriers between the physical and spiritual worlds, allowing the phoenix to communicate with divine entities and receive guidance for its sacred missions. The musical intervals used in the phoenix's songs followed mathematical ratios that ancient philosophers recognized as fundamental to the very structure of reality. These intervals, based on simple numerical relationships, created harmonic progressions that seemed to unlock hidden potentials within both the phoenix and its listeners. The songs could induce prophetic visions, accelerate healing processes, and even influence weather conditions in the immediate vicinity of the phoenix's performance. Human attempts to reproduce or imitate the phoenix's song invariably ended in failure. Despite the efforts of the most skillful musicians and the use of the most sophisticated instruments available to ancient civilizations, the phoenix's vocal apparatus possessed unique anatomical features that made its extraordinary range and tonal quality impossible to replicate by artificial means. The creature's throat contained resonating chambers that functioned like the pipes of a massive organ, while its respiratory system could generate air pressure far exceeding what is achievable for any earthly being. The phoenix's song also served as a form of magical protection, creating acoustic barriers capable of repelling hostile forces and purifying contaminated environments. Specific frequencies generated by the phoenix's voice possess the power to disrupt the molecular structure of toxins and pollutants, transforming harmful substances into harmless components through pure sonic energy. This purifying ability made the phoenix's presence particularly valuable in regions suffering from plague, famine, or other forms of ecological decline. The sacred ritual of the phoenix's self-immolation began not with a dramatic gesture, but with subtle changes in the creature's behavior, indicating the approaching end of its predetermined cycle. Ancient observers, claiming to have witnessed these transformations, described a gradual fading of the phoenix's characteristic glow, as if the internal fires that sustained its supernatural existence were slowly consuming themselves from within. The bird's magnificent crest, usually radiant with golden flame, began to flicker irregularly, creating patterns of light and shadow on its form that seemed to follow no earthly rhythm. The phoenix's preparation for death involved a complex series of actions, demonstrating the creature's deep understanding of cosmic time and astronomical precision. Egyptian priests recorded observations of phoenix specimens that began their final preparations during specific phases of the moon, always commencing actions when the moon entered the stage of the waning crescent. This choice of timing ensured that the bird's death and its subsequent rebirth would occur during periods of minimal celestial interference, when the gravitational forces governing earthly cycles are at their weakest point. The selection of materials for the funeral pyre represented perhaps the most critical aspect of the entire process, requiring the phoenix to exercise supernatural discernment in choosing aromatic substances that would facilitate rather than hinder its transformation. The bird spent weeks or even months gathering the necessary components, traveling vast distances to obtain specific varieties of wood and resin possessing exactly the chemical properties required for a successful self-immolation. Each material had to meet the strictest standards of purity and potency, with the phoenix rejecting specimens that showed even the slightest signs of contamination or degradation. Cassia bark formed the foundation of every phoenix funeral pyre, but far from just any cassia was suitable for this sacred purpose. The phoenix sought only bark collected from trees growing at specific altitudes. In the mountains of Arabia, where intense solar radiation and extreme temperature fluctuations concentrated the aromatic oils to their maximum potency, this cassia possessed a characteristic reddish-brown color and a texture that felt almost metallic to the touch, indicating the presence of rare mineral compounds. absorbed from the volcanic soils in which these trees took root. The phoenix's method of gathering cassia demonstrated abilities extending beyond ordinary avian capabilities. Using its obsidian-sharp beak, the creature could strip the bark from the cassia trees in continuous spirals that preserved the integrity of the aromatic oils within the plant tissue. These spirals, reaching 20 feet in length, were then carefully coiled and stored in hidden caches that the phoenix maintained throughout its territory. The bark required seasoning in these caches for specific periods, during which exposure to special combinations of sunlight and moonlight enhanced its combustible properties. Cinnamon branches served as the structural framework for the phoenix's nest, but here too, only specimens meeting exceptional criteria were accepted. The phoenix required cinnamon wood that had naturally dried in the desert winds for at least 7 years, during which time the cellular structure of the wood underwent changes, making it capable of burning at exactly the temperature required to trigger the phoenix's transformation. This seasoned cinnamon possessed a pale golden color and a density that made it surprisingly heavy. Despite its apparent dryness, the phoenix's technique for gathering cinnamon involved snapping the branches at specific points of tension, which preserved the internal structure of the wood fibers. The creature seemed to understand principles of material science that humanity would discover only millennia later. It chose branches based on their resonant frequencies when struck by its beak. Each accepted branch, upon testing, emitted a clear bell-like tone, indicating optimal moisture content and cellular alignment for the self-immolation process. Tears of frankincense represented the most precious component of the phoenix's funeral pyre, requiring the creature to seek only the finest specimens from trees that had reached perfect maturity. The phoenix could distinguish tears of frankincense by their internal crystalline structure, choosing only those specimens that formed perfect geometric patterns within their translucent amber matrix. These superior tears, no larger than a human finger, contained concentrated aromatic essences that evaporated at specific temperatures, creating the complex atmospheric conditions necessary for the phoenix's transformation. Gathering frankincense required the phoenix to exercise great patience and precision. The creature visited frankincense groves during those short periods when atmospheric pressure and humidity levels created optimal conditions for resin formation. Using its beak as a surgical instrument, the phoenix could extract the tears from the tree bark without damaging the surrounding tissues, ensuring that each specimen retained its full aromatic potential. The gathered tears were then stored in specialized pouches that the phoenix fashioned from its own shed feathers, creating containers that maintained the ideal environmental conditions for preserving the resin's volatile compounds. Myrrh was the final essential component of the funeral pyre, but the phoenix's requirements for this substance exceeded even its requirements for frankincense. The creature sought myrrh that had undergone natural fermentation processes within the tree, resulting in the formation of complex chemical compounds that exist nowhere else in nature. This fermented myrrh possessed a deep, almost black color and an aromatic profile in which bitter and sweet elements were combined in perfect balance. The fermentation process occurred only in those myrrh trees that had been struck by lightning, with the electrical discharge triggering chemical changes that could not be replicated artificially. The phoenix's ability to find lightning-struck myrrh trees demonstrated supernatural sensory capabilities, allowing it to detect electromagnetic residues that persisted for many years. After the initial lightning strike, the creature circled potential trees at a high altitude, using its extraordinary vision to observe subtle variations in the electromagnetic fields around various specimens. Once a suitable tree was identified, the phoenix carefully extracted the fermented myrrh using methods that preserved the fragile chemical balance created by the lightning strike. The construction of the funeral pyre followed geometric principles that seemed to reflect a deep understanding of the mathematical dependencies governing combustion and energy transfer. The phoenix began by creating a circular base approximately 12 feet in diameter, using the largest pieces of cassia bark to establish a foundation that would provide stable support for the entire structure. The pieces of bark were arranged in overlapping spirals, creating natural ventilation channels that ensured sufficient airflow for complete combustion, while maintaining structural integrity throughout the burning process. Above this base, the phoenix wove seasoned cinnamon branches into a complex three-dimensional matrix resembling a giant basket or bowl. The weaving pattern followed specific mathematical sequences that distributed tension evenly throughout the structure, creating optimal gaps for the placement of aromatic resins. Each intersection of the cinnamon branches was secured using techniques that apparently utilized the phoenix's supernatural ability to fuse organic materials at a molecular level, creating bonds stronger than any mechanical fastening system. The placement of the tiers of frankincense within the nest structure required extraordinary precision. Each tier was positioned according to calculations factoring in its size, internal crystalline structure, and aroma intensity. The phoenix arranged these precious specimens in geometric patterns that ensured synchronous ignition and optimal distribution of aromatic vapors throughout the combustion chamber. The patterns varied among different phoenix individuals, suggesting that each distinct creature possessed a unique understanding of the mathematical principles governing its own transformation. Myrrh was distributed throughout the nest in quantities carefully calculated to provide the chemical catalysts necessary for the phoenix's metamorphosis. Pieces of fermented myrrh were embedded into the cinnamon framework at specific intervals that corresponded to the phoenix's understanding of its own anatomy and the physiological changes occurring during self-immolation. Each piece of myrrh was positioned to interact with specific organs or body systems, ensuring that the transformation process proceeded in the correct sequence and at the proper rate. The finished funeral pyre represented a masterpiece of natural engineering, incorporating principles of chemistry, physics, and mathematics in a way that seemed to transcend the usual limitations of animal intelligence. The proportions of the structure followed the rules of the golden ratio, which created optimal acoustic properties, allowing the phoenix's final song to resonate throughout the nest and intensify the ignition process. The arrangement of materials created natural focusing effects that concentrated heat precisely at those points where the phoenix's body underwent the most critical transformations. When the phoenix finally took its place in the completed nest, it assumed a specific pose honed by countless generations of the species' existence. The bird settled in the very center of the structure, spreading its wings at angles calculated for maximum exposure to the rising flames, while ensuring an even distribution of heat throughout its entire body. The phoenix held its head straight, and its majestic crest was fully unfurled to catch the first wisps of aromatic smoke, signaling the beginning of the transformation process. The ignition of the funeral pyre occurred through mechanisms that ancient observers could hardly understand or explain. The phoenix's final song, reaching frequencies that seemed to resonate with the molecular structure of the aromatic materials, caused spontaneous combustion simultaneously at multiple points throughout the nest. The tiers of frankincense ignited. First, their crystalline structures shattered under sonic pressure, releasing concentrated aromatic oils that flared with a brilliant white flame. Then the base of cassia bark caught fire. Its concentrated oils created a deep amber flame that served as the thermal foundation for the entire conflagration. This amber flame burned at temperatures exceeding those of ordinary wood fires, producing the intense heat necessary to trigger chemical changes in the phoenix's supernatural physiology. The flames spread upward through the cinnamon framework, with each branch igniting sequentially, creating a controlled burn that maintained the optimal temperature. Throughout the transformation process, the pieces of myrrh embedded throughout the nest ignited. Last, their fermented compounds generated flames of deep purple and indigo colors that seemed to absorb light rather than emit it. This mysterious flame created the specific atmospheric conditions necessary for the phoenix's consciousness to detach from its physical form, while maintaining the connection required for subsequent resurrection. The myrrh flame continued to burn long after other materials were consumed, providing a temporal bridge between the phoenix's death and its final rebirth. The physical transformation of the phoenix during self-immolation included changes occurring, according to principles unknown to traditional biology, as the flames enveloped the creature's body. Its supernatural feathers began to glow with an internal light that grew brighter. As the external fire intensified, the phoenix's flesh underwent a process of sublimation, in which solid tissues turned directly into aromatic vapors, bypassing intermediate liquid stages, creating clouds of incense smoke that carried the essence of the creature's life force. The phoenix's bones, consisting of materials that apparently combined organic and mineral components, resisted the flames longer than the soft tissues, but eventually succumbed to the intense heat generated by the aromatic oils. These bones did not simply burn, but turned into crystalline structures that preserved the geometric patterns of the original skeletal framework, and acquired new properties facilitating the creature's subsequent resurrection. The bone crystals continued to emit a faint light throughout the burning process, creating a glowing skeleton that remained visible through the flames until the final moments of transformation. Ancient sources provided varying accounts of the duration of the phoenix's self-immolation. Different authors reported burning periods from 3 to 7 days, depending on specific circumstances and the particular phoenix individual observed. The variation in burning time apparently correlated with the duration of the phoenix's previous life cycle. Creatures that lived for longer periods required more extensive transformation processes to achieve full renewal. The emergence of a new phoenix from the ashes represented the most mysterious aspect of the entire resurrection cycle, involving processes that seemed to operate according to principles beyond ordinary biological understanding. The initial form rising from the cooling ashes bore no resemblance to the majestic bird that preceded it, representing a small segmented creature that ancient observers described as something similar to a worm or a larva. This larval form, only 3 to 4 inches long, possessed an opalescent quality, reflecting light in iridescent patterns on its translucent body. The transformation from the larval form into a mature phoenix occurred through stages, resembling insect metamorphosis, but proceeded on an accelerated schedule, compressing normal developmental processes into periods of days rather than months or years. The phoenix larva consumed the remaining ashes of its predecessor, absorbing the crystallized bone fragments and residual aromatic compounds that contained the template for its future development. This consumption process provided both the raw materials and the genetic information necessary for the creature's complete reconstruction. Various ancient authors recorded different time frames for the full resurrection cycle of the phoenix, and these variations reflected both differences in observations and the cultural priorities of different civilizations. Herodotus, drawing on Egyptian priestly sources, reported a cycle of 500 years, which corresponded to certain astronomical calculations used in Egyptian religious practices. This timeline correlated with specific stellar configurations that Egyptian astronomers used to track cosmic cycles and predict significant events in both the divine and mortal worlds. Later Greek sources offered alternative cycle durations, reflecting different interpretations of the phoenix's cosmic significance. Some authors proposed cycles of 1,461 years, which corresponded to the Sothic period used in Egyptian calendar calculations, linking the phoenix's resurrection directly to the heliacal rising of Sirius and the astronomical phenomena that governed the Egyptian understanding of time and eternity. This longer cycle emphasized the phoenix's role as a cosmic timekeeper, whose existence provided a link between earthly events and celestial movements. Roman writers introduced even more elongated timeframes. Some accounts described the phoenix's lifespan as 12,954 years, encompassing several precessional cycles and linking the creation's existence to the vast cosmic rhythms governing the movement of entire stellar systems. These expanded time frames reflected the Roman interest in imperial permanence and the desire to link their civilization with cosmic forces operating on scales far exceeding a human life. Differences in the reported cycle duration might reflect the existence of different varieties or lineages of the phoenix. each operating according to separate temporal patterns serving different functions in the cosmic order. Some ancient sources suggested that several lines of phoenixes existed simultaneously, with each line following its own resurrection schedule to ensure that the cosmic functions performed by these creatures would continue without interruption, even if individual specimens failed to successfully complete their transformation cycle. The role of the phoenix as a herald of significant events extended beyond its function as a symbol of renewal, establishing the creature as one of the most powerful omens of antiquity, whose appearances invariably preceded fateful changes in the mortal world. Ancient chroniclers documented manifestations of the bird at turning points in human history, recording detailed accounts of encounters with the phoenix that coincided with the rise and fall of dynasties, outbreaks of devastating epidemics, and the beginning of golden ages that changed the face of entire civilizations. These appearances followed patterns suggesting that the phoenix possessed supernatural knowledge of future events, arriving in specific locations precisely when its presence carried maximum symbolic weight and prophetic significance. Egyptian records from the 3rd dynasty describe the appearance of the phoenix during the reign of Pharaoh Djoser, whose architect was Imhotep, who revolutionized monumental architecture with the construction of the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. Court astronomers recorded the bird's arrival in Heliopolis on the very day construction of the pyramid began, interpreting this synchronicity as divine approval of the pharaoh's ambitious building project. The phoenix remained visible in the sacred groves for 7 consecutive days, and during this time its presence attracted pilgrims from across the kingdom who came to witness what they considered a manifestation of his direct involvement in earthly affairs. The creature's behavior during this prolonged stay provided Egyptian priests with detailed observations that influenced their understanding of phoenix symbolism for centuries. Every morning, the phoenix perched on the highest branches of the sacred pasea tree, facing east as the sun rose over the horizon. Its crest shone with particular intensity during these dawn vigils, creating a secondary light source that seemed to rival the sun itself for dominance in the eastern sky. During the day, the phoenix descended to lower branches, eventually settling at ground level in the afternoon hours when the sun reached its zenith. This daily movement pattern was interpreted by Egyptian theologians as a demonstration of the phoenix's role in facilitating communication between different levels of cosmic reality. The bird's morning position in the treetops epitomized its connection to the celestial spheres and divine knowledge, while its daytime descent to earth symbolized its function as a messenger bringing heavenly wisdom to mortal recipients. The precise timing of these movements corresponded to the prayer schedule maintained by the temple priests, indicating the phoenix's active participation in the religious rituals governing daily worship in Heliopolis. During the reign of Pharaoh Khufu of the 4th dynasty, builder of the Great Pyramid at Giza, multiple sightings of the phoenix were recorded throughout the kingdom, with the creatures appearing simultaneously in temple complexes separated by hundreds of miles. Such an unprecedented multiplication of phoenix manifestations puzzled contemporaries, who had never before seen more than one individual at any given time. The coordinated appearances occurred during the pyramid construction phase, when workers were installing the pyramidion that was to complete the monument's geometric perfection. Egyptian chroniclers interpreted these numerous phoenix appearances as proof that the Great Pyramid represented a project of such cosmic importance that it required supernatural oversight from several divine heralds. It was observed that each phoenix individual followed identical behavioral patterns, suggesting they were manifestations of a single divine consciousness rather than separate beings. The birds arrived at their temples at exactly the same moment each day, performed identical flight and song rituals, and departed simultaneously as the sun set behind the western horizon. The acoustic effects generated by these coordinated phoenix appearances created phenomena audible over vast distances. Witnesses reported harmonic resonances that seemed to emanate from the earth itself, rather than from the bird's vocalizations, These subterranean harmonics corresponded to the natural frequency of the limestone foundation of the Giza Plateau, suggesting that the phoenix manifestations somehow influenced the geological foundation of the pyramid complex. Modern archaeological research has revealed that the internal chambers of the Great Pyramid possess acoustic properties that amplify and focus sound waves in ways that ancient builders could not have achieved using ordinary engineering methods alone. Greek historical records document appearances of the phoenix at several crucial moments in the development of Hellenic politics, with the most significant sighting occurring during the Persian Wars, when Xerxes' massive invasion army threatened to crush the Greek city-states. Athenian chroniclers recorded the appearance of a phoenix over the Acropolis on the morning of the Battle of Salamis, where Greek naval forces would win a decisive victory over the Persian fleet. Thousands of Athenian citizens gathered at the city's highest point to observe the approaching naval battle, witness the bird's arrival. The phoenix's behavior at this critical moment differed significantly from the patterns documented in Egyptian sources, reflecting the creature's adaptation to different cultural contexts and religious frameworks. Instead of perching on sacred trees or temple structures, the phoenix circled continuously over the Acropolis at an altitude that allowed observers throughout Athens to see it, while maintaining a panoramic view of the naval battle unfolding in the waters below. The bird's flight path traced complex geometric patterns that seemed to mirror the tactical maneuvers performed by the Greek and Persian fleets. Contemporary Greek observers noted that the phoenix's crest burned with unusual intensity during the battle, creating a beacon of light that remained visible even in the afternoon hours, when direct sunlight usually obscures such phenomena. The creature's song, audible despite the distance and noise of the sea battle, was described as including musical themes that resonated with traditional Greek war hymns, while introducing harmonic variations that no human composer could ever have conceived. These musical elements seemed to embolden the Greek forces, while simultaneously creating acoustic interference that disrupted Persian communication signals. The outcome of the Battle of Salamis, which ended with the destruction of the Persian fleet and the preservation of Greek independence, was interpreted by Athenian religious authorities as direct confirmation of the phoenix's prophetic significance. The creature's presence at this pivotal moment established its reputation in Greek culture as a herald of military victory and divine protection of a righteous cause. Subsequent Greek military campaigns were often postponed until favorable omens were received, with phoenix sightings considered among the most promising signs for commanders preparing to engage superior enemy forces. Roman historical accounts document phoenix sightings during several transitions between imperial dynasties, with the most detailed records dating to the period and the death of Emperor Augustus and the accession of Tiberius. Roman chroniclers described the appearance of a phoenix in the gardens of Augustus's villa at Prima Porta during the emperor's final illness, with the creature keeping vigil outside the ruler's bedchamber for the 3 days preceding his death. The phoenix's behavior during this period was interpreted as evidence that the creature served not only as a herald of significant events, but also as a psychopomp, facilitating the transition of important souls between the mortal and divine worlds. The phoenix observed in the final days of Augustus's life exhibited characteristics that differed from both Egyptian and Greek descriptions, suggesting that the creature adapted its manifestations to the specific cultural and religious context in which it appeared. Roman observers noted that this phoenix had silvery highlights in its plumage, complementing the traditional gold and crimson coloration, creating a color scheme that matched Roman imperial symbolism and the silver denarii bearing Augustus's image. The creature's crest included elements resembling the laurel wreaths worn by victorious generals, linking its appearance directly to Roman concepts of military and political achievement. The phoenix's departure from Prima Porta occurred at the exact moment of Augustus's death, with witnesses reporting that the creature rose into the sky emitting a song that included musical themes from the funeral hymns traditionally performed during imperial funerals. The bird's flight trajectory passed directly over the Campus Martius, where Augustus's funeral pyre was to be erected, before it disappeared behind the eastern horizon in the direction of the rising sun. This departure pattern established a precedent followed during subsequent changes of emperors, and phoenix sightings became expected elements of dynastic succession ceremonies. During the reign of Emperor Nero, phoenix sightings took on more sinister characteristics, reflecting the growing instability of the Roman political system and the emperor's increasingly unpredictable behavior. Numerous witnesses reported appearances of the phoenix in various parts of the empire. During the year preceding the Great Fire of Rome, the creatures exhibited restless flight trajectories and emitted sounds that differed markedly from the harmonious songs documented in more favorable periods. These phoenix manifestations were characterized by sharp, dissonant notes that caused a sense of unease in listeners and were interpreted by contemporaries as warnings of impending disaster. Phoenix sightings during Nero's reign demonstrated the creature's ability to serve as a herald of both negative and positive events, and its appearances provided early warning of catastrophes that would affect vast masses of the population. Roman augurs developed complex methods for interpreting subtle variations in the behavior of the phoenix, which allowed them to distinguish favorable omens from warnings of impending doom. The angle of the creature's flight, the intensity of its crest's flame, and the specific musical intervals included in its songs all provided clues about the nature and timing of the events its appearance foretold. The most dramatic appearance of a phoenix during the Neronian period occurred during the Great Fire itself. Numerous witnesses reported a creature flying directly through the flames, devouring vast portions of the city. The phoenix's ability to traverse the conflagration without visible harm was interpreted as proof of its supernatural nature and its connection to the purifying aspects of fire, which would ultimately lead to the reconstruction and renewal of Rome. The creature's presence during the fire was viewed as a promise that destruction would eventually lead to positive transformation rather than final devastation. Egyptian records from the Ptolemaic period document phoenix sightings coinciding with significant changes in the kingdom's relationship with expanding Roman power during the reign of Cleopatra V, the last pharaoh of independent Egypt. Phoenix appearances became more frequent as political tensions with Rome reached a critical level. These appearances followed patterns suggesting that the creatures were reacting to the approaching end of pharaonic rule and the transformation of Egypt from an independent kingdom into a Roman province. The phoenix observed during Cleopatra's reign exhibited characteristics that combined traditional Egyptian symbolism with elements that seemed to anticipate the coming Roman dominance. The creature's plumage included subtle purple reflections, corresponding to Roman imperial colors, while maintaining the gold and crimson coloration associated with pharaonic power. This color combination was interpreted by Egyptian priests as evidence that the phoenix was preparing the spiritual foundations of the kingdom for political changes that would preserve Egyptian religious traditions within the Roman imperial administration. The last phoenix appearance of the Ptolemaic period occurred during the Battle of Actium, where Octavian's forces defeated the combined fleet of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Egyptian chroniclers recorded the appearance of a phoenix over the battlefield. At decisive moments of the fight, the creature's behavior served as a supernatural commentary on the political transformation taking place below. The phoenix's flight trajectory passed over the Egyptian and Roman positions, but gradually shifted toward the territory occupied by Octavian's victorious forces, symbolically indicating the transfer of divine favor from the Ptolemaic dynasty to the nascent Roman Empire. The creature's song during this pivotal battle included musical elements from both Egyptian and Roman traditions, creating a harmonic synthesis reflecting the cultural fusion that would characterize Egypt under Roman rule. Egyptian observers interpreted this musical blend as proof that the phoenix was facilitating a peaceful transition that would preserve the essential elements of pharaonic civilization, while adapting them to new political realities. The bird's presence at this moment of dynastic change demonstrated its role as a divine mediator, capable of smoothing transitions between different forms of government and cultural systems. natural catastrophes throughout the ancient Mediterranean world were often preceded by phoenix sightings, which gave advance warning to populations possessing the knowledge necessary to correctly interpret these signs. Volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and devastating floods were frequently heralded by phoenix appearances exhibiting specific behavioral characteristics associated with geological instability and environmental disaster. These warning manifestations allow communities to take protective measures that significantly reduce the number of casualties during subsequent calamities. The eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD, which destroyed Pompeii and Herculaneum, was preceded by phoenix sightings throughout the Bay of Naples region in the months leading up to the catastrophic event. Roman naturalists recorded detailed observations of these phoenix manifestations, noting that the creatures exhibited restless flight patterns and emitted sounds including low-frequency harmonics, capable of resonating with subterranean geological structures. The birds' behavior suggested they possessed sensory abilities, allowing them to detect the preliminary seismic activity that preceded major volcanic eruptions. The phoenix specimens spotted before the Vesuvius eruption exhibited physical characteristics different from those documented in more peaceful periods. Their plumage had a darker coloration, and the crest's flame appeared more orange than the usual golden hue. These visual changes were interpreted by Roman augurs as specific indicators of volcanic activity, where darker colors represented the subterranean forces that would eventually manifest as lava flows and pyroclastic deposits. The altered appearance of these phoenix manifestations provided trained observers with advance warning, allowing some communities to evacuate before the eruption moved into its most destructive phase. Seismic activity in the eastern Mediterranean was invariably preceded by phoenix appearances, following recognizable patterns associated with tectonic instability. The creatures appeared on high ground, overlooking regions where tectonic stress was accumulating, demonstrating flight behavior that seemed to trace the subterranean fault lines, where earthquakes would eventually occur. These seismic phoenix manifestations were characterized by rapid, angular flight trajectories, contrasting sharply with the smooth, graceful movements typical of phoenix appearances during more stable periods. The acoustic phenomena associated with phoenix sightings before earthquakes provided particularly valuable information for communities that understood how to interpret these supernatural warnings. The creatures' songs included ultrasonic frequencies that resonated with crystalline rock formations under tectonic stress, creating harmonic patterns reflecting the buildup of underground pressure before major seismic events. Experienced augurs could analyze these acoustic signatures to predict not only the timing of impending earthquakes, but also their approximate magnitude and the specific geographical areas most at risk of serious destruction. Outbreaks of plague throughout the ancient world were often preceded by phoenix appearances exhibiting characteristics specifically linked to epidemic diseases and large-scale mortality. These manifestations differed significantly from other types of phoenix sightings. The creatures behaved as if seeking to warn the population of an impending health crisis, while simultaneously providing spiritual solace to communities facing mass death and suffering. The phoenix's traditional association with death and rebirth made it particularly suited for the role of herald of epidemics that would test the survival and renewal capacity of an entire civilization. The Untermini plague, which devastated the Roman Empire in the 2nd century AD, was preceded by phoenix sightings across the Mediterranean region, exhibiting consistent patterns linked to epidemic disease. These phoenix manifestations were characterized by mournful vocalizations, including musical themes traditionally associated with funeral rites and memorial ceremonies. The creatures' flight routes passed through major urban centers, where the plague would eventually cause the highest mortality rates. This suggests their appearances were specifically intended to warn the population of likely paths of disease transmission. Phoenix specimens observed before plague outbreaks exhibited subtle changes in external appearance that trained observers could recognize as indicators of an impending epidemic. The creature's plumage took on a slightly duller hue, reducing the intensity of their characteristic glow, and their crest flames flickered irregularly in patterns indicating internal agitation or ailment. These visual changes were interpreted by ancient physicians as supernatural diagnostics, providing advance warning of the specific types of diseases that would afflict humanity. The transformation of the phoenix from a religious symbol into a literary device reached its zenith in the works of Publius Ovidius Naso, whose metamorphoses provided the most influential and enduring poetic treatment of the legendary bird in all of classical literature. Writing during the reign of Augustus, Ovid approached the myth of the phoenix with the sophisticated literary sensitivity characteristic of his entire creative legacy, producing verses that elevated the creature above mere folklore into the realm of high art. His description of the phoenix appeared in the 15th book of the Metamorphoses, where it served as a culminating example of transformation and renewal, providing thematic unity to the entire work. His phoenix differed significantly from the versions preserved in the historical accounts of Herodotus or Pliny, reflecting the poet's primary concern with aesthetic impact rather than ethnographic accuracy. While earlier sources focused on the creature's religious significance and its role in Egyptian temple worship, Ovid concentrated on the dramatic potential inherent in the phoenix's cycle of death and rebirth. His verses transformed the bird's self-immolation from a ritual act of maintaining cosmic order into a deeply personal tragedy that resonated with the universal human experience of loss and renewal. The Roman poet's description of the phoenix's appearance relied heavily on visual imagery that would have been familiar to his sophisticated urban audience, including references to precious materials and luxury goods reflecting the prosperity of Augustan Rome. Ovid's phoenix possessed feathers that glisten like polished golden gems. Each feather was described in terms evoking associations with the exquisite decorative arts that adorn the homes and public spaces of the imperial capital. This aesthetic transformation made the phoenix accessible to readers who might have little interest in Egyptian religious practices, but could appreciate the creature's beauty from the standpoint of familiar artistic standards. The poet's account of the phoenix's nest construction emphasized the creature's discerning taste. In the selection of aromatic materials, Ovid provided detailed catalogues of spices and resins that read like inventories of the most exclusive merchants in the Roman Forum. His phoenix gathered cinnamon in the distant mountains of Arabia, cassia in groves existing beyond the reach of ordinary mortals, and tiers of frankincense formed by processes that seemed to require divine intervention. These material descriptions served several literary functions, establishing the phoenix's supernatural status, while simultaneously demonstrating Ovid's own encyclopedic knowledge of the exotic substances that fascinated Roman consumers. Ovid's treatment of the phoenix's death and rebirth sequence represented perhaps his greatest contribution to the creature's literary development, turning what was a relatively simple religious concept into a complex reflection on the nature of identity and continuity. The poet's verses explored the philosophical implications of a creature that could die completely, yet somehow remain fundamentally unchanged through its resurrection. This paradox of simultaneous transformation and permanence gave Ovid the opportunity to examine broader questions about the relationship between physical form and essential identity, which would influence literary treatments of the phoenix for centuries. The influence of Ovid's description of the phoenix extended far beyond the immediate impact of the Metamorphoses themselves, establishing narrative canons and poetic imagery that became standard elements in subsequent literary treatments of the creature. Medieval authors, encountering the phoenix myth predominantly through Ovid's verses, inherited his emphasis on the bird's aesthetic splendor and the dramatic intensity of its transformation cycle. The Roman poet's attention to precious materials and exotic locations became a defining characteristic of phoenix literature. Throughout the European Middle Ages and the Renaissance, Ovid's approach to the phoenix myth also reflected broader literary currents in Augustan poetry, particularly the tendency to use mythological subjects as a means for exploring contemporary political and social issues. The phoenix's ability to achieve renewal through self-destructs could be read as a commentary on the recent transformation of the Roman Republic into an empire, where Augustus's rise to power represented a form of political rebirth. Emerging from the ashes of civil war and constitutional crisis, this allegorical dimension of Ovid's phoenix added layers of meaning that made the creature relevant to readers who might otherwise have considered it merely exotic folklore. Gaius Plinius Secundus, known as Pliny the Elder, approached the phoenix from the position of a naturalist rather than a poet, including the creature in his comprehensive survey of the natural world, The Natural History. Pliny's treatment of the phoenix reflected his systematic methodology and desire to document all known phenomena, whether natural or supernatural, within a single structure. His account relied heavily on earlier sources, especially Herodotus, while adding observations and interpretations that reflected the expanded geographical knowledge available to Roman scholars in the 1st century AD. Pliny's phoenix inhabited a more precisely defined geographical context than the creature described by earlier authors. The Roman naturalists provided specific details about the bird's Arabian homeland and its place within the broader ecosystem of the region. His description presented the phoenix as an integral component of the unique natural environment of the Arabian Peninsula, where extreme climatic conditions and unusual geological formations created circumstances capable of supporting supernatural forms of life. Such an ecological approach to the phoenix myth represented a significant departure from purely religious or literary treatments, suggesting that the creature's extraordinary characteristics might be the result of natural processes operating on principles not yet understood by contemporary science. The historian's description of the phoenix's physical characteristics reflected his commitment to empirical observation and systematic classification, with detailed measurements and anatomical descriptions resembling technical specifications for more ordinary bird species. Pliny reported that the phoenix is approximately equal in size to an eagle, has a wingspan of about 12 feet, and stands 4 feet tall when upright. His account contains specific details about the creature's coloration, noting that the golden hues of the plumage varied in intensity on different parts of the body, with the brightest coloration concentrated in the crest and tail feathers. Pliny's treatment of the phoenix's life cycle included a chronological precision that reflected Roman administrative practices and their emphasis on accurate record keeping. The naturalist reported that the phoenix lives exactly 540 years, a figure that differed both from Herodotus's estimate of 500 years and from various longer cycles proposed by other sources. This specific time interval may have reflected Pliny's access to later Egyptian records, or his attempts to reconcile conflicting accounts through mathematical analysis. The Roman historian's precision in matters of chronology established a precedent for subsequent scientific treatments of the phoenix, which emphasized quantitative accuracy over mythological symbolism. The Natural History also provided detailed information on the behavioral characteristics of the phoenix at different stages of its life cycle, paying particular attention to the creature's interaction with other species and its impact on the Arabian ecosystem as a whole. Pliny described how the presence of the phoenix affected local fauna. Other bird species reportedly fled their territories when the legendary creation appeared nearby. These behavioral observations suggested that the phoenix possessed some form of supernatural influence, extending beyond its own immediate needs and activities. Pliny's description of the funeral pyre construction process included technical details reflecting his engineering expertise and familiarity with Roman construction technologies. The naturalist described how the phoenix selected and arranged aromatic materials according to principles that seemed to anticipate the development of architectural theory and materials science. His analysis of the nest's structural properties suggested that the phoenix possessed an intuitive understanding of load-bearing calculations and thermal dynamics, allowing it to create a combustion chamber capable of generating the intense heat necessary for transformation. The Roman historian's treatment of the phoenix's regeneration process reflected his medical knowledge and understanding of biological development, with detailed descriptions of the stages the creature passed through, from its initial larval form to full maturity. Pliny's account suggested that the phoenix's resurrection followed patterns similar to insect metamorphosis, but proceeded on an accelerated schedule, compressing normal developmental processes into a matter of days. This biological approach to the phoenix myth provided later scholars with a basis for understanding the creature's supernatural characteristics in terms of natural processes that might be discovered through future scientific research. Cornelius Tacitus, the greatest historian of the early Roman Empire, encountered the phoenix during his research into the reign of Tiberius, when the creature's appearance in Egypt coincided with significant political events. In the eastern provinces, Tacitus approached the phoenix with the skeptical methodology characteristic of his historical works, examining the political and social circumstances surrounding reported encounters, while maintaining a proper scholarly distance from the supernatural claims associated with the creature. His account in the Annals presented one of the most detailed analyses of how phoenix manifestations functioned within the broad context of imperial administration and provincial governance. The Roman historian's investigation into cases of phoenix sightings during the Tiberian period revealed the complex ways in which supernatural phenomena intersected with practical political interests in the eastern Mediterranean. Tacitus documented how provincial governors used phoenix appearances to legitimize political decisions and demonstrate divine approval of administrative reforms, while the local population interpreted the creature's presence in accordance with their cultural traditions and political interests. This intersection of supernatural symbolism and practical governance provided Tacitus with an opportunity to examine the mechanisms by which imperial power maintained control over diverse peoples with varying religious and cultural foundations. Tacitus's account of the phoenix's appearance in Egypt during the consulship of Paulus Fabius Maximus and Lucius Vitellius provided a detailed insight into the administrative procedures that Roman officials used to investigate and document supernatural phenomena. The historian described how the provincial governor appointed an official inquiry into the fact of the phoenix sighting, during which testimony from numerous witnesses was collected, and expert opinions from Egyptian priests and Roman augurs were requested. Such a bureaucratic approach to investigating the supernatural reflected the systematic methodology characteristic of the Roman administration, and demonstrated how imperial officials attempted to maintain rational control over phenomena that challenged conventional understanding. The Roman historian's analysis of witness testimony regarding the phoenix revealed significant discrepancies in the reports of different observers. Variations in detail reflected the cultural backgrounds and personal interests of individual witnesses. Egyptian priests emphasized the creature's connection to traditional sun worship and its role in maintaining cosmic order, while Roman officials focused on the potential significance of the phoenix as an omen affecting imperial policy and provincial stability. These differing points of view served as evidence for Tacitus's broader arguments about the challenges facing Roman administrators who had to manage peoples with fundamentally different worldviews and religious traditions. Tacitus's treatment of the phoenix also reflected his deep understanding of how historical narratives could be influenced by political considerations and cultural biases affecting the reliability of sources. The historian noted that reports of phoenix manifestations often became encrusted with embellishments over time, and later versions included details that served the political interests of certain groups or individuals. Such a critical approach to the sources of the phoenix myth demonstrated Tacitus's commitment to empirical methodology and his recognition that supernatural claims require the same rigorous analysis as more traditional historical evidence. The emergence of the phoenix as a literary symbol in Greek and Roman poetry reflected broad cultural trends that transformed mythological creatures from religious entities into vehicles for artistic expression and philosophical reflection. Greek poets of the Hellenistic period began to include imagery of the phoenix in works exploring themes of artistic immortality and the interconnection between creative achievement and personal mortality. The creature's cycle of death and rebirth provided poets with powerful metaphors for the creative process itself. The self-immolation of the phoenix personified the destruction of former artistic forms, while its resurrection symbolized the emergence of new creative possibilities. Roman poets expanded upon these Greek innovations, developing the symbolism of the phoenix in a way that reflected specifically Roman concerns regarding imperial permanence and the link between individual achievement and collective cultural continuity. The phoenix became a standard element of imperial panegyrics, where the creature's immortality served as a metaphor for the eternal nature of Roman civilization and the enduring legacy of specific emperors or dynasties. This political application of phoenix symbolism demonstrated how mythological creatures could be adapted for the propaganda needs of various political systems, while maintaining their core symbolic functions. The appearance of the phoenix in Greek dramatic literature reflected the creature's potential for exploring tragic themes related to sacrifice, transformation, and the price of achieving immortality. Playwrights included phoenix imagery in works investigating the moral consequences of striving for eternal life at the cost of accepting periodic destruction and renewal. These dramatic treatments of the phoenix myth often focused on the psychological dimensions of the creature's experience, exploring questions of identity continuity and the emotional toll of repeated cycles of death and resurrection. Roman dramatic adaptations of phoenix themes reflected different cultural priorities, with a greater emphasis on the creature's role as a symbol of imperial stability and dynastic continuity. Roman playwrights used phoenix imagery to explore themes related to political succession and the transfer of power between different generations of rulers. The creature's ability to achieve renewal through self-destructs provided Roman dramatists with metaphors for the political processes through which imperial power was passed from one emperor to his successor, often through violent transitions that ultimately led to state stability and renewed prosperity. The inclusion of the phoenix in philosophical literature reflected the creature's potential for illustrating abstract concepts related to identity, continuity, and the very nature of existence. Stoic philosophers found in the phoenix a powerful example of how apparent destruction could serve constructive purposes within the broader context of cosmic order and natural law. The creature's willingness to accept death as a necessary prerequisite for renewal aligned with Stoic teachings on the importance of accepting fate and working within natural processes rather than attempting to resist or bypass them. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, referred to the phoenix as an example of how individual beings can achieve harmony with cosmic processes by accepting the cyclical nature of existence and recognizing that apparent ends often represent new beginnings in different forms. The philosopher Emperor's treatment of phoenix symbolism reflected his broader understanding of how personal mortality could be transcended through alignment with eternal principles operating according to natural law rather than individual desire or ambition. Stoic interpretations of the phoenix myth emphasize the creature's demonstration of rational acceptance of natural processes, where the bird's self-immolation personifies the ideal of voluntary cooperation with cosmic necessity rather than futile resistance to inevitable change. This philosophical approach to the phoenix provided Stoic thinkers with concrete imagery for abstract concepts related to fate, providence, and the relationship between individual will and universal order. The creature's ability to achieve immortality through the repeated acceptance of mortality illustrated Stoic teachings on how apparent contradictions can be resolved through a proper understanding of natural principles. Neoplatonist philosophers developed even more complex interpretations of phoenix symbolism, incorporating the creature into comprehensive metaphysical systems dealing with the relationship between material and spiritual reality. Plotinus and his followers saw in the phoenix's transformation cycle a representation of the soul's journey through different levels of existence, where the creature's death personified the separation of the soul from material constraints, and its rebirth symbolized the attainment of higher forms of spiritual consciousness. The Neoplatonic interpretation of the phoenix emphasized the creature's role as a bridge between different ontological levels, and its ability to exist simultaneously in the material and spiritual realms served as a model for understanding how individual souls can transcend physical existence while maintaining their essential identity. This philosophical application of phoenix symbolism influenced later Christian interpretations of the creature as a symbol of resurrection and spiritual transformation, demonstrating how pagan mythological concepts could be adapted to serve different religious and philosophical frameworks. The treatment of the phoenix in classical literature established interpretative schemes and symbolic associations that influenced European literary traditions. For more than a millennium, medieval and Renaissance authors drew heavily on Greek and Roman precedents, adapting phoenix imagery for the needs of Christian theology and contemporary artistic requirements. The literary evolution of the creature from exotic folklore to a complex philosophical symbol demonstrated the ability of mythological material to transcend its original cultural contexts and acquire new meanings reflecting the changing intellectual and spiritual needs of different historical periods. The role of the phoenix as a cosmic timekeeper extended far beyond its function as a herald of earthly events, encompassing a complex understanding of astronomical cycles that directly link the creature to the fundamental rhythms governing the universe itself. Ancient Egyptian astronomers recognized that phoenix appearances corresponded to specific celestial configurations marking critical transition points in the cosmic order, with the bird's manifestations serving as living calendars that helped human observers track the passage of vast time cycles beyond ordinary historical reckoning. The connection between phoenix appearances and solar phenomena formed the basis of this cosmic timekeeping system. Egyptian priests documented correlations between sightings of the creature and specific stages of the sun's annual journey across the celestial sphere. The arrival of the phoenix in Heliopolis invariably coincided with the heliacal rising of certain stars, serving as markers for seasonal transitions, agricultural labor, and religious rites that defined the rhythm of Egyptian civilization. These astronomical correlations were not accidental, but reflected the fundamental nature of the phoenix as a manifestation of the solar deity, operating within predictable cosmic structures. The most significant astronomical correlation concerned the link between phoenix appearances and the Sothic cycle, a period of 1,461 years that marked a full rotation of the Egyptian calendar relative to the actual solar year. Egyptian astronomers discovered that their 365-day calendar year was approximately 6 hours shorter than the true astronomical year, leading to a gradual shift of their seasonal festivals through the natural seasons. Over many centuries, the heliacal rising of Sirius, the star they called Sobdet, provided a fixed astronomical reference point, allowing priests to track this calendrical drift and predict when the civil and natural calendars would once again coincide. Phoenix observations consistently occurred in years when the Sothic cycle reached certain milestone points, suggesting the creature possessed supernatural knowledge of these grand astronomical rhythms. The most spectacular appearances of the phoenix were recorded in years when Sirius rose heliacally on the first day of the Egyptian New Year, an event that occurred only once every 461 years and marked a complete restart of the calendar system. These rare alignments were interpreted by Egyptian theologians as moments of cosmic renewal, where the fundamental order of creation was confirmed and strengthened through divine intervention. The phoenix's connection to stellar cycles extended beyond the Sothic period, encompassing other astronomical phenomena operating on even longer timescales. Egyptian astronomical texts describe phoenix manifestations that coincided with the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of the Earth's rotational axis, causing a gradual shift in the position of the stars over periods of approximately 26,000 years. This precessional cycle was divided by Egyptian astronomers into 12 periods of approximately 2,160 years each, corresponding to the time required for the vernal equinox point to pass through each of the 12 zodiacal constellations. The phoenix's role in tracking precessional cycles reflected the ancient Egyptian understanding of time as a series of nested rhythms, operating at different scales, from the daily solar cycle to the vast cosmic ages defining the rise and fall of entire civilizations. The creature's supernatural longevity allowed it to serve as a living link between these different timescales. Individual phoenix specimens carried memories and knowledge, spanning many human generations, while remaining connected to cosmic processes operating on geological timescales. Ancient Egyptian concepts of time included complex mathematical dependencies, linking astronomical observations to the theological principles governing the very nature of existence. The phoenix's life cycle was believed to embody these mathematical principles, and the creature's periodic death and rebirth served as a physical manifestation of the numerical ratios governing cosmic order. The specific duration of phoenix life cycles varied according to different astronomical calculations, but all versions reflected the underlying mathematical harmonies linking the creation's existence to the fundamental structure of reality. The concept of Zep Tepi, literally meaning the first time, held a central place in Egyptian cosmology as the primordial epoch, when the gods established the basic models and principles that would govern all subsequent existence. This mythical golden age represented a time when divine beings walked directly upon the earth, setting the templates for natural processes, social institutions, and religious practices that would endure throughout human history. The phoenix's connection to Zep Tepi was fundamental, rather than accidental. The creature served as one of the primary mechanisms through which the creative principles, established in the first time, continued to operate in the mortal world. According to Egyptian theological texts, the original emergence of the phoenix from the primeval waters of Nun occurred during the epoch of Zep Tepi itself, making the creature one of the first conscious entities to rise in the created universe. This primordial birth established the phoenix as a direct witness to the fundamental acts of creation and a repository of the divine knowledge that defined the establishment of cosmic order. Each subsequent incarnation of the phoenix carried within it the memories and wisdom accumulated during Zep Tepi, ensuring that the essential principles of creation remained accessible to later generations. Despite the passage of vast periods of time, the phoenix's role as the guardian of Zep Tepi knowledge extended beyond mere preservation, and included the active maintenance of the creative principles established in the first time. The creature's periodic self-immolation and rebirth served as a mechanism for renewing and strengthening these original patterns, preventing their degradation or distortion under the influence of the natural entropy affecting all temporal phenomena. This renewal process was not automatic, but required the phoenix's conscious participation in complex rituals that reconnected the transient world with its eternal foundations. Egyptian priests developed detailed ceremonial procedures designed to facilitate the phoenix's role in maintaining cosmic order. These rituals included astronomical observations, mathematical calculations, and theological principles reflecting a deep understanding of the interconnection between divine and natural law. The timing of these ceremonies was determined by careful observation of celestial phenomena, ensuring the synchronization of human religious activity with the cosmic rhythms governing the life cycle and transformation processes of the phoenix itself. The phoenix's connection to cosmic creation extended beyond its role in preserving the principles of Zep Tepi, encompassing active participation in the continuous process of sustaining and renewing the universe. Egyptian cosmology conceptualized creation not as a single completed event, but as an ongoing process, requiring constant divine attention and intervention to prevent the established order from being swallowed by the forces of chaos. The phoenix served as one of the primary conduits through which this continuous creative work was carried out, and the creature's activities helped maintain the delicate balance between order and chaos that allowed life to flourish. Ancient astronomical records capture correlations between phoenix appearances and various celestial events interpreted as moments of cosmic importance, requiring supernatural intervention. Solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and the appearances of comets were all associated with phoenix sightings, indicating the creature's active participation in managing these astronomical phenomena. These correlations were understood not as mere coincidences, but as proof of the phoenix's role as a cosmic administrator responsible for ensuring that celestial events unfolded according to the divine plan rather than by chance. The phoenix's ability to influence astronomical events reflected its fundamental nature as a being existing simultaneously in the transient and eternal worlds, possessing the perspective necessary to perceive cosmic patterns that remained invisible to purely earthly observers. The creature's supernatural vision allowed it to detect the subtle gravitational and electromagnetic influences preceding major astronomical events, enabling it to position itself accordingly to facilitate or contain these cosmic phenomena according to the divine will. Egyptian astronomical texts describe specific instances where phoenix appearances coincided with unusual stellar phenomena that seemed to violate normal astronomical patterns, stars suddenly increasing in brightness, planetary movements deviating from predicted paths, and the appearance of new celestial objects were all linked to the phoenix's activity, indicating the creature's ability to manipulate cosmic forces through mechanisms beyond conventional physical laws. These astronomical anomalies were interpreted as evidence of the phoenix's active role in cosmic governance rather than as natural phenomena operating on unknown principles. The mathematical dependencies governing the phoenix's life cycles reflected a deep understanding of the numerical harmonies linking astronomical observations to theological principles. Egyptian mathematicians discovered that the phoenix's appearance cycles could be expressed as combinations of fundamental astronomical periods, with the creature's manifestations occurring at moments when several celestial rhythms reach synchronization. These mathematical correlations suggested that the phoenix's existence was subject to the same numerical principles regulating planetary motion, stellar evolution, and other cosmic processes. The phoenix's role in cosmic chronometry included not only the measurement of vast time cycles, but also the active coordination of various astronomical rhythms to maintain universal harmony. The creature's supernatural abilities allowed it to detect when various celestial cycles began to move out of synchronization, threatening the stability of the cosmic order due to the accumulation of small discrepancies that could lead to serious disruptions over time. The phoenix's periodic self-immolation served as a mechanism for resetting these cosmic rhythms and restoring proper synchronization between different astronomical phenomena. Ancient Egyptian understanding of the phoenix's cosmic significance included the recognition that the creature's activities influenced not only astronomical phenomena, but also earthly processes depending on celestial influences. The timing of seasonal changes, the nature of the annual Nile flood, the migration paths of various animal species, and the growth cycles of important agricultural crops were all believed to be under the influence of the phoenix's role in maintaining cosmic order. The creature's presence ensured that these earthly rhythms remained properly synchronized with their celestial counterparts, preventing the ecological chaos that could result from a disruption of astronomical links. The phoenix's connection to cosmic renewal extended beyond the maintenance of existing structures and encompassed the introduction of new creative possibilities, preventing the universe from becoming static or stagnant. Egyptian theological texts describe how each incarnation of the phoenix brought with it subtle innovations and improvements that enhanced the efficiency and beauty of cosmic processes without disrupting their essential stability. These creative contributions reflected the phoenix's unique position as a being combining a perfect memory of original principles with direct experience of temporal change and development. The astronomical correlations associated with phoenix appearances provided ancient observers with sophisticated tools for predicting and preparing for significant cosmic events that could affect both the divine and human worlds. Egyptian priests developed complex calculation systems using phoenix observation data to forecast eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and other celestial phenomena with striking accuracy. These predictive abilities were not merely academic exercises, but served practical purposes in agricultural planning, religious scheduling, and political decision-making requiring synchronization with cosmic rhythms. The phoenix's role as a cosmic timekeeper also included the preservation and transmission of astronomical knowledge accumulated over periods far exceeding a human life. Each incarnation of the phoenix inherited observation data and mathematical ideas developed by its predecessors, creating a continuous chain of cosmic awareness spanning thousands of years. These accumulated layers of knowledge allowed the phoenix to detect long-term trends and patterns in astronomical phenomena that would remain invisible to human observers. With their limited temporal perspective, the creature's supernatural memory encompassed not only astronomical observations, but also the complex mathematical dependencies governing the interaction of various celestial cycles. The phoenix's understanding of these cosmic harmonies allowed it to predict when different astronomical rhythms would reach significant alignments, or when disruptions in one cycle might affect the stability of others. This comprehensive awareness of cosmic interconnections made the phoenix an invaluable resource for maintaining universal order and preventing cascading failures that could result from seemingly insignificant astronomical perturbations. The emergence of the phoenix as a central figure in comparative mythology reveals fascinating parallels and divergences with other immortal birds in various cultural traditions, indicating either a common origin or a universal human fascination with creatures transcending the boundaries of mortality. The simurgh from Persian mythology represents perhaps the most striking comparison to the Greco-Egyptian phoenix, embodying similar themes of wisdom, renewal, and cosmic significance while maintaining distinct Persian characteristics, reflecting the unique religious and cultural values of ancient Iran. The simurgh dwelt upon the mythical Mount Kafur cosmic mountain that Persian cosmology placed at the edge of the known world, serving as a bridge between the earthly and celestial spheres. This geographical location mirrored the phoenix's association with distant Arabian deserts and Egyptian sacred sites, establishing both creatures as inhabitants of liminal spaces where the ordinary laws of nature gave way to supernatural possibilities. The mountain dwelling of the simurgh possessed characteristics reminiscent of the construction of the phoenix's nest. The creature selected precious stones and aromatic wood to create a sanctuary, reflecting its divine nature and cosmic responsibilities. Persian accounts describe the simurgh as a significantly larger bird than the phoenix. Some sources indicated a wingspan capable of obscuring the sun when the creature soared on high. This immense size reflected Persian cultural preferences for grandiose imagery and their conception of divine beings as entities whose physical presence commanded immediate respect and awe. The plumage of the simurgh combined the gold and crimson coloration characteristic of the phoenix, with additional elements reflecting Persian artistic traditions, including oscillated patterns similar to a peacock's, which were believed to contain prophetic visions of future events. The life cycle of the simurgh differed substantially from the model of periodic self-immolation and rebirth of the phoenix. Persian sources described a creature that achieved immortality through continuous renewal, rather than through cyclical death. The feathers of the simurgh possess regenerative properties, allowing the creature to heal from any injury or illness by shedding damaged plumage and regrowing new feathers that incorporated the lessons learned from past experience. This regenerative immortality reflected Persian theological concepts, emphasizing gradual spiritual evolution rather than the dramatic cycles of transformation. Associated with the Egyptian and Greek phoenix traditions, the wisdom traditions surrounding the simurgh established the creature as a repository of cosmic knowledge, surpassing even the phoenix's role as a guardian of primordial mysteries. Persian texts described the simurgh as possessing complete knowledge of all events that had occurred since the beginning of creation, along with a prophetic awareness of future developments that would unfold according to the divine plan. This comprehensive temporal perspective made the Simurgh a sought-after source of guidance for heroes and rulers in need of supernatural assistance when solving complex political and spiritual tasks. The relationship between the Simurgh and human heroes in Persian literature created narrative patterns significantly different from the Greek and Roman treatments of encounters with the phoenix. While classical sources usually depicted phoenix appearances as omens or symbols, requiring interpretation, Persian epics included direct interaction between the Simurgh and mortal characters, who received specific aid in achieving their goals. The creature's willingness to intervene directly in human affairs reflected Persian cultural values, emphasizing the accessibility of divine guidance and the possibility of achieving heroic greatness through supernatural partnership. Garuda from the Hindu tradition represented another fascinating parallel to the phoenix, embodying similar themes of divine power and cosmic significance, while reflecting the distinctive theological and philosophical framework of Indian religious thought. Garuda's role as the mount of Vishnu established the creature as an integral component of Hindu cosmology, with direct involvement in the continuous maintenance of cosmic order through service to one of the religion's primary deities. This divine partnership created a relationship between bird and god that surpassed the phoenix's connection to solar deities in terms of intimacy and functional integration. Hindu legends describe the birth of Garuda from a cosmic egg that was incubated for thousands of years. The creature emerged fully mature, possessing abilities that immediately established it as one of the most powerful beings in the universe. This birth narrative differed substantially from the cyclical regeneration of the phoenix, indicating a creature that achieved immortality through divine origin, rather than through repeated processes of transformation. The primary emergence of Garuda from the cosmic egg was accompanied by phenomena affecting the entire universe. The creature's first cry made mountains tremble, and oceans retreat in recognition of its supernatural authority. The physical characteristics attributed to Garuda combined avian features with anthropomorphic elements, reflecting Hindu artistic traditions and theological concepts regarding the interconnection of divine and human nature. Unlike the purely bird-like phoenix, Garuda possessed a humanoid torso and arms, allowing the creature to wield weapons and perform ritual gestures while retaining the wings and talons necessary for flight and predatory behavior. This hybrid anatomy allowed Garuda to perform multiple functions in Hindu mythology, acting simultaneously as a mount, a warrior, and a participant in cosmic ceremonies. Garuda's relationship with serpents gave rise to mythological conflicts that were parallel to, yet distinct from, the phoenix's role in maintaining cosmic order. Hindu texts describe the unceasing war between Garuda and the Naga serpent-like beings, personifying the chaotic forces that threaten universal order. These battles required Garuda to use both physical prowess and supernatural abilities, with victories over serpentine enemies serving to maintain the cosmic balance necessary for continued existence. The phoenix's role in preventing chaos was carried out through different mechanisms, focusing on temporal renewal rather than direct combat with the entities of chaos. The speed attributed to Garuda in Hindu sources surpassed even the extraordinary flight capabilities associated with the phoenix. Sanskrit texts describe the creature's ability to traverse the entire universe in moments and move faster than thought itself. This supernatural speed allowed Garuda to serve as a messenger between different cosmic realms and to react instantly to threats to universal order regardless of their location. The creature's speed also allowed it to manipulate time itself, arriving at destinations before departing from points of origin and creating temporal paradoxes that demonstrated mastery over the fundamental structure of reality. Hindu philosophical interpretations of Garuda incorporated the creature into complex metaphysical systems, exploring the relationship between individual consciousness and the universal mind. Vedanta thinkers saw in Garuda's service to Vishnu the personification of the ideal relationship between the individual soul and cosmic consciousness, where the creature's flawless devotion served as a model for human spiritual development. This philosophical dimension of Garuda mythology created an interpretative framework significantly different from the predominantly cosmological symbolism associated with the phoenix in the Egyptian and Greek traditions. The Thunderbird of various North American indigenous traditions represented another fascinating comparison to the phoenix, embodying themes of atmospheric power and spiritual renewal, while reflecting the distinctive cultural values and ecological consciousness of indigenous societies. Thunderbird mythology varied significantly across different tribal traditions, but common elements included an association with storm phenomena, the ability to generate lightning and thunder through wing movements, and a role as protectors of human communities from supernatural threats. The Thunderbird's connection to weather phenomena created mythological functions parallel to the phoenix's role in maintaining cosmic order. Focusing on more immediate ecological concerns, indigenous tales describe thunderbirds as beings capable of bringing rain to drought-stricken regions, dispersing dangerous storms that threaten human settlements, and maintaining the atmospheric conditions necessary for success in agriculture. These weather control abilities made thunderbirds essential participants in the seasonal cycles that define traditional Native American life, as the creature's activities directly influence the survival and prosperity of communities. Physical descriptions of thunderbirds varied significantly depending on tribal traditions, but most accounts emphasized the creature's immense size and its ability to generate electrical phenomena through natural processes. Some sources described thunderbirds with wingspans of hundreds of feet, capable of creating hurricane-force winds with their flight trajectories. The creature's eyes were said to flash with lightning, and the flapping of its wings produced the thunder accompanying severe storms. These electrical characteristics distinguish thunderbirds from the fire symbolism associated with the phoenix, while maintaining similar themes of supernatural power and cosmic significance. The thunderbird's role in indigenous spiritual traditions often included direct intervention in human affairs, with the creatures acting as protectors against malevolent supernatural entities threatening the tribe's well-being. These protective functions gave rise to narrative models, similar to those found in Persian literature concerning the Simurgh, where divine birds actively participate in human conflicts rather than serving merely as symbols or omens. The thunderbird's willingness to engage in battle with evil spirits reflected Native American cultural values, emphasizing the interconnectedness of the natural and supernatural worlds and the possibility of forming alliances between human and divine entities. The Chinese Fenghong represented perhaps the most complex comparison to the Greco-Egyptian phoenix, combining elements parallel to Western traditions with distinctly Chinese characteristics, reflecting Confucian political philosophy and Taoist metaphysical concepts. The Fenghong's role in Chinese imperial symbolism created functions reminiscent of the phoenix's appearance during dynastic transitions, including specifically Chinese ideas regarding the interconnection between political legitimacy and cosmic order. Chinese sources describe the Fenghong as a composite creature, combining the traits of several bird species to create an image personifying the harmony and balance characteristic of ideal rule. The creature's head resembled that of a rooster, symbolizing vigilance and the announcement of new beginnings, while its body included elements of a swallow, representing grace and adaptability. The tail feathers of the Fenghong displayed the exquisite plumage of a peacock, indicating beauty and refinement, and its overall proportions recalled the dignity and power associated with cranes. In Chinese artistic traditions, the Fenghong's connection to imperial power was exercised through different mechanisms than those associated with the phoenix's appearances in Mediterranean traditions. Instead of serving as an omen of a change in dynasty, the Fenghong appeared during periods of virtuous rule to demonstrate heaven's approval of specific emperors and their policies. The creature's presence indicated that the current dynasty possessed the mandate of heaven and ruled according to the principles that maintained cosmic harmony. Conversely, the absence of the Fenghong during periods of corrupt or incompetent rule served as proof that the imperial power had lost divine support and required a change of dynasty. Chinese accounts of the Fenghong's behavior emphasized the creature's role as a judge of moral character, rather than just a symbol of renewal or transformation. The Fenghong possessed the supernatural ability to perceive the ethical qualities of rulers, and appeared only in the presence of individuals whose personal virtue and state policy aligned with cosmic principles. This moral dimension of Fenghong mythology reflected the Confucian emphasis on ethical governance, and the belief that political power draws its legitimacy from moral excellence, rather than mere military might or hereditary rights. The relationship of the Fenghong with other mythological creatures in the Chinese tradition created complex symbolic systems that differed significantly from the relatively isolated role of the phoenix in Mediterranean mythology. Chinese sources describe the partnership between the Fenghong and dragons, personifying the ideal balance between imperial power and natural forces, where the two creatures work together to maintain cosmic harmony through complementary functions. The association of the dragon with water and earth balanced the Fenghong's connection with air and fire, creating symbolic representations of the elemental interactions that sustain the universal order. Artistic depictions of the Fenghong in Chinese imperial art included color symbolism that both echoed and diverged from phoenix traditions in interesting ways. Like the phoenix, the Fenghong possess golden plumage representing solar energy and imperial power. However, Chinese versions often included additional colors reflecting the five-element system central to Chinese cosmology. Red feathers represented fire and the south, blue feathers symbolized water and the north, while green, white, and yellow colors indicated wood, metal, and earth respectively. This more complex color scheme allowed the Fenghong to serve as a comprehensive symbol of cosmic balance, rather than focusing predominantly on solar symbolism. Patterns of influence between these various traditions of immortal birds remain a subject of scholarly debate, with evidence supporting both theories of independent development and theories of cultural transmission. The geographical distribution of phoenix-like creatures along ancient trade routes suggests that merchant contacts may have facilitated the spread of mythological concepts between different civilizations, with local cultures adapting foreign bird symbolism to their own religious and political requirements. The role of the Silk Road in connecting Mediterranean, Persian, Indian, and Chinese civilizations provided numerous opportunities for mythological exchange and synthesis. Archaeological evidence from various ancient sites has revealed artistic depictions combining elements of different immortal bird traditions, indicating that cultural contact led to the emergence of hybrid mythologies. Greco-Bactrian coins of the Hellenistic period demonstrate bird imagery combining phoenix characteristics with elements apparently borrowed from the Persian Simurgh traditions, indicating that Alexander's conquests created the conditions for mythological syncretism. In addition to political and cultural fusion, the expansion of the Roman Empire into regions with established immortal bird traditions created additional opportunities for mythological interaction and mutual influence. Roman military campaigns in Mesopotamia brought Roman observers into direct contact with Persian legends of the Simurgh, while trade relations with India introduced Roman merchants to Garuda mythology. These contacts may have influenced later Roman interpretations of phoenix symbolism, as imperial writers incorporated elements of foreign traditions that enhanced the creature's appeal to the diverse peoples within the empire. Similarities between the various traditions of immortal birds extend beyond external characteristics and encompass deeper structural patterns indicating shared psychological or spiritual needs addressed by these mythological figures. The universal appeal of creatures that overcome mortality through various mechanisms of renewal may reflect fundamental human anxieties about death, continuity, and the possibility of achieving eternity in an impermanent world. The enduring association of these creatures with cosmic order and divine power suggests that immortal bird symbolism performs similar functions, across different cultures, despite variations in specific characteristics and narrative details. Differences between immortal bird traditions provide equally valuable insights into the distinctive cultural values and religious priorities of their respective civilizations. The phoenix's emphasis on cyclical death and rebirth reflected the Mediterranean cultural fascination with transformation and renewal, while the simurgh's continuous regeneration aligned with Persian concepts of gradual spiritual evolution. Garuda's warrior characteristics reflected Hindu theological concepts of the unceasing struggle between order and chaos, and the Thunderbird's weather control abilities addressed Native American concerns regarding ecological harmony and success in agriculture. The transformation of the phoenix from a local Egyptian religious symbol into the definitive Mediterranean personification of triumph over death occurred as a result of a complex process of theological synthesis reflecting the broad intellectual currents of late antiquity, as the classical world grappled with questions of mortality, spiritual transformation, and the possibility of existence beyond physical death. The phoenix emerged as a powerful symbol capable of bridging abstract philosophical concepts and concrete mythological imagery. This symbolic path of development reached its zenith in the Hellenistic and Roman periods, when the creature's cyclical death and rebirth became a cornerstone of mystery religions and esoteric traditions promising initiates a direct experience of spiritual immortality. The Eleusinian Mysteries, the most prestigious and influential of the ancient mystery religions, incorporated phoenix symbolism into their secret teachings on death and rebirth, which promised adepts a blissful afterlife and spiritual transformation. The phoenix's ability to achieve renewal through self-destructs gave the mystery priests a concrete metaphor for the spiritual death and rebirth that initiates were to experience during the sacred rituals held in the underground halls beneath the Telesterion. The creature's emergence from its own ashes drew a parallel with the initiate's emergence from ritual death with expanded spiritual consciousness and guaranteed salvation in another world. Interpretations of phoenix symbolism in the mystery religions emphasized the creature's voluntary acceptance of death as a necessary condition for achieving higher forms of existence. This theological foundation differed significantly from early Egyptian concepts, focused on the phoenix's role in maintaining cosmic order through predictable cycles. The mysteries transformed the phoenix into a model of individual spiritual achievement, where the creature's self-immolation represented a conscious choice to abandon lower forms of being for the sake of attaining divine consciousness. The Orphic Mysteries, which promised initiates knowledge of the soul's journey through different levels of existence, developed particularly complex interpretations of phoenix symbolism, embedding the creature into comprehensive metaphysical systems dealing with reincarnation and spiritual evolution. Orphic texts describe the phoenix's cycle of death and rebirth as a representation of the soul's progression through multiple incarnations, where each death signifies the completion of one stage of spiritual development, and each rebirth marks the beginning of a journey on a higher level of consciousness. Orphic theologians found specific correspondences between the materials used for the phoenix's funeral pyre and the spiritual qualities that souls needed to develop during earthly incarnation. Frankincense represented pure devotion and spiritual aspiration. Myrrh symbolized the bitter experience necessary for gaining wisdom, and aromatic wood indicated various virtues that souls accumulated through righteous deeds. The careful selection and arrangement of these materials by the phoenix demonstrated the conscious preparation required for successful spiritual transformation. The Mithraic Mysteries, popular among Roman soldiers and state officials, incorporated phoenix imagery into their elaborate initiation ceremonies held in underground temples, designed to resemble cosmic caves. Mithraic initiates passed through 7 grades of initiation, each associated with specific planetary influences and spiritual qualities. The phoenix appeared in Mithraic iconography as a symbol of the highest degree of initiation, representing the complete spiritual transformation. that allowed an adept to transcend earthly limitations and attain union with the solar deity. Mithraic interpretations of phoenix symbolism emphasized the creature's connection to solar cycles, and its role as a mediator between the earthly and celestial spheres. The creature's daily appearance at dawn provided a parallel to the spiritual awakening experienced by Mithraic initiates as they progressed through the grades of the mysteries, while the creature's periodic self-immolation represented the ultimate sacrifice required to achieve divine consciousness. The subterranean location of Mithraic temples created a symbolic environment where initiates could experience spiritual death and rebirth in a setting reminiscent of the phoenix emerging from the ashes of its funeral pyre. Dionysian mysteries developed interpretations of phoenix symbolism, focused on the creature's connection to themes of death, dismemberment, and reunification, which characterized the mythology of Dionysus himself. These mysteries emphasized the violent aspects of spiritual transformation, where the phoenix's self-immolation represented the necessary destruction of mundane consciousness, preceding the emergence of divine awareness. Initiates into the Dionysian rites underwent a ritual experience mimicking death and rebirth, where phoenix imagery served as a symbolic framework for understanding these transformative processes. Dionysian theology interpreted the phoenix's funeral pyre as a representation of the cosmic forces that periodically destroy and renew the universe itself. The creature's willingness to accept destruction demonstrated the proper attitude toward the cyclical processes governing both individual spiritual development and universal evolution. This cosmological dimension of phoenix symbolism allowed the Dionysian mysteries to link personal transformation to broader cosmic rhythms, suggesting that individual spiritual achievement contributes to the continuous renewal of creation itself. The integration of phoenix symbolism into Gnostic traditions produced some of the most profound theological interpretations of the creature's significance. Gnostic texts developed complex mythological systems in which the phoenix held a key place in the cosmic drama of spiritual liberation. Gnostic theologians saw in the phoenix's transformation cycle an image of the soul's liberation from material imprisonment and its return to its divine origins. The death of the creature represented the separation of the soul from the physical world, and its rebirth symbolized the attainment of gnosis, the direct knowledge of divine reality that constituted the essence of salvation. Gnostic interpretations of phoenix mythology included the creature in detailed cosmological schemes, describing the many levels of being between the material world and the highest divine realm. The phoenix's ability to traverse these different levels of reality made it a valuable guide for souls seeking to escape material shackles and reach reunion with divine consciousness. Gnostic texts describe specific techniques for invoking the phoenix's aid during the soul's posthumous journey through the various cosmic spheres, separating earthly existence from divine unity. The phoenix's role in Gnostic theology extended beyond individual salvation, encompassing broader cosmic functions associated with the ongoing struggle between spiritual and material forces. Gnostic myths describe the phoenix as a messenger of the divine realm, facilitating the liberation of souls trapped in material existence. The creature's periodic appearances in the physical world represented divine interventions, designed to give spiritual seekers the knowledge and inspiration necessary to achieve gnosis and exit the cycle of material incarnations. Hermetic traditions, which combined Greek philosophical concepts with Egyptian religious practices and Mesopotamian astronomical knowledge, developed interpretations of phoenix symbolism that emphasized the creature's role as a teacher of alchemical and magical arts. Hermetic texts described the phoenix as a master of transformation, possessing complete knowledge of the processes by which base materials could be transmuted into higher forms. The creature's ability to transform itself through fire gave alchemists a model for understanding the spiritual and material transformations their art sought to achieve. Hermetic interpretations of phoenix mythology included the creature in complex symbolic systems, linking alchemical processes to spiritual development and cosmic evolution. The phoenix's funeral pyre represented the alchemical furnace where base metals were transmuted into gold, and the creature's death and rebirth symbolized the stages of dissolution and reunification characteristic of successful alchemical operations. The aromatic materials used in the phoenix's nest corresponded to specific alchemical substances that possessed the power to facilitate transformation when combined according to correct procedures. The influence of phoenix symbolism on ancient concepts of the soul's immortality extended far beyond the mystery religions, encompassing the major philosophical and theological traditions that defined the intellectual life of the entire Mediterranean. Platonic philosophers found in the phoenix a vivid illustration of abstract concepts related to the eternal nature of the soul and its relationship with the physical world. The creature's ability to maintain an essential identity while undergoing complete physical transformation gave Platonists imagery for understanding how the soul could survive bodily death while retaining its individual characteristics and accumulated wisdom. Platonic interpretations of phoenix mythology emphasized the creature's demonstration of the soul's fundamental independence from material limitations, the phoenix's readiness to destroy its physical form for the sake of achieving renewal, illustrated Plato's teaching that the soul's true nature transcends bodily existence, and that death represents a liberation rather than an end. The creature's emergence from its own ashes provided a concrete image of the soul's continued life after death and its ultimate return to divine origins through philosophical contemplation and ethical development. Aristotelian philosophers approached phoenix symbolism from different positions that reflected their emphasis on empirical observation and systematic classification of natural phenomena, while maintaining appropriate skepticism regarding the creature's literal existence. Aristotelian thinkers found in phoenix mythology valuable illustrations of principles related to formal causality and the relationship between essence and accident. The phoenix's ability to retain its essential identity through radical physical transformation demonstrated how formal causes could persist through material changes, providing a philosophical basis for understanding continuity and change in both natural and metaphysical contexts. Stoics developed interpretations of phoenix symbolism that emphasized the creature's demonstration of rational acceptance of natural processes and cosmic necessity. The phoenix's voluntary self-immolation illustrated the Stoic ideal of living in accordance with nature and accepting fate without resistance or complaint. The creature's cyclical transformation represented the continuous processes of cosmic renewal that Stoic cosmology identified as fundamental characteristics of universal order, where individual beings participate in these large-scale patterns through intelligent cooperation with natural law. Stoic interpretations of phoenix mythology included the creature in their understanding of the cosmic cycle of creation and destruction that they believe governed universal evolution. The phoenix's death and rebirth paralleled the periodic world fires and renewals that Stoic cosmology predicted for the universe as a whole, where individual transformations contributed to the general patterns of cosmic development. This cosmological dimension of phoenix symbolism allowed the Stoics to link individual ethical development to universal processes, suggesting that personal virtue contributes to the continuous perfection of creation itself. Later classical accounts of phoenix sightings reflected the gradual transformation of ancient Mediterranean religious and philosophical traditions as Christianity began to establish itself as a dominant spiritual force in the Roman Empire. Christian writers encountered phoenix mythology through their study of classical literature and philosophy. Initially, they approached the creature with suspicion, seeing it as a pagan symbol that might compete with the Christian teaching of resurrection and eternal life. However, Christian theologians gradually realized the potential value of phoenix symbolism for illustrating Christian concepts of death and resurrection, particularly the central tenet of Christ's victory over death and the promised resurrection of the faithful. The phoenix's ability to attain new life through voluntary death gave Christian writers powerful imagery for understanding Christ's sacrifice and its redemptive effect. The creature's emergence from its own ashes resonated with the narratives of the resurrection, that formed the foundation of the Christian faith, while its cyclical renewal pointed toward the eternal life promised to faithful believers. Early Christian interpretations of phoenix symbolism sought to draw a line between pagan mythological elements that contradicted Christian doctrine and symbolic meanings that could be adapted for Christian theological purposes. Christian authors rejected those aspects of phoenix mythology that suggested the creature's divinity, or its role in maintaining cosmic order independently of divine providence, while accepting symbolic interpretations that emphasized themes of sacrifice, transformation, and renewal consonant with Christian teaching. The gradual integration of the phoenix into Christian symbolism occurred through the works of the Church Fathers, who found in the creature's mythology valuable illustrations for complex theological concepts, difficult to explain through purely abstract argumentation. The first epistle of Clement, written in the late 1st century, contained one of the earliest Christian mentions of the phoenix, describing the creature's transformation cycle as proof of the possibility of resurrection and the reliability of divine promises of eternal life. Later Christian writers expanded these initial interpretations, developing increasingly complex theological structures that incorporated phoenix symbolism into systematic treatises on eschatology, soteriology, and spiritual development. The creature's voluntary self-sacrifice provided imagery for understanding Christ's redemptive death, while its resurrection offered hope to believers facing persecution and martyrdom. The phoenix's ability to maintain its essential identity through radical transformation illustrated the Christian teaching regarding the continuity of the person after death and resurrection. The passage of phoenix mythology through late antiquity reflected the broader cultural and intellectual changes that transformed the ancient Mediterranean world. As classical civilization gave way to medieval Christian culture, the evolution of the creature from an Egyptian religious symbol to a Greek literary device, a Roman imperial emblem, and further to a Christian theological metaphor, demonstrated the striking adaptability of mythological symbols and their capacity to acquire new meanings while maintaining core symbolic functions. The enduring appeal of the phoenix throughout these cultural transformations reflected its unique ability to address fundamental human anxieties regarding mortality, identity, and the possibility of transcendence, which remained constant despite the shifts in religious and philosophical paradigms. The promise of renewal through destruction resonated with audiences facing political upheaval, religious persecution, and personal loss, offering hope for positive transformation even in the bleakest circumstances. By the time of the decline of the classical world and the beginning of the formation of medieval civilization, the phoenix had established itself as one of the most powerful and universal symbols. In the Western intellectual tradition, the creature's journey from the sacred groves of Heliopolis to the theological treatises of Christian scholars demonstrated the complex processes by which ancient wisdom was preserved, transformed, and passed on to future generations. The phoenix became more than just a mythological creature, it evolved into an eternal symbol of humanity's deepest aspiration for renewal, transformation, and triumph over the limitations of mortal existence. The legacy established by these ancient interpretations continued to influence European thought throughout the medieval period and beyond, with the phoenix serving as a bridge between classical and Christian traditions, helping to preserve essential elements of ancient wisdom while adapting them to new religious and cultural goals. In this final transformation, the phoenix achieved its own form of immortality, ensuring that its message of hope and renewal would continue to inspire future generations, long after the civilizations that created it had passed into history.